Hello, hello. How is everyone today? Sorry for the quick turnaround on the stream. I know this gives people very little time on to get ready. Um, but things are rather fast paced for me this morning. Just getting things done. Turn around on a second here. The So this morning, I wanted to start off talking about um, surprise stream. It's not. I know it's like these streams. They happen around this time all the time. But at the same time, I usually give people at least another half an hour to uh, get ready and quickly. What are your thoughts on the White Walkers returning in House of the Dragon season 2 spy photos? It was quite a shock when I saw that headline. I don't know what to think or how they're going to pull that into the story. So it's very odd. I mean, maybe you'd have Jace discover something really incredible and it doesn't matter because he's just going to die. But it's good to give people some excitement or something more pressing about the importance of the prophecy. But that's the thing is you could all of a sudden like Jace knows everything and he just needs to tell everyone and then you can just kill him off, or something like that. Before um Anyway, before we get into things, I wanted to talk about Theon. Oh, this is too bright here. It's a bright hot day in Taipei today. I wanted to talk about Theon for a little bit, and the reason I think Theon is so interesting and the Ironborn are so interesting is that when I first joined the fandom, um, the everyone was talking about R plus L equals J, and one of the big things to say, well, why is R plus L equals J so important, was to talk about the Great Northern Conspiracy and how everyone in the North is just going to turn around all of a sudden and start following Jon Snow, and that's going to pull in, everything. It's going to bring all the plot points together. Rob's will is going to be pulled in, and Lyanna's Mormon's letter is so important, and all of these sorts of things, and it tells this story about the Grand Northern Conspiracy is this idea that somehow everyone is secretly rooting for Jon. And however, if you actually read the chapters that are about the North, you actually have a very different story. And so I'm going to go into this really quick. But if you remember, the North kind of, once Rob leaves at the end of a Game of Thrones, the North takes on a new plot, and that is essentially the Ironborn invasion. So Balon Greyjoy has this idea of taking the North, and he essentially goes through it as so. He sends Vic to Deepwood Mott to close up the bottle. This is kind of the most important. This is essentially the most important part of it. And then he sends Asha up here to Deepwood Mott. And then he sends Theon to the Stony Shore. And this is essentially his big 3-part plan. Now, Victarion's plan is the Victarion part is the only one that really matters. The idea is that they're causing trouble up here in the North, and Rob can't get back because Victarion has Deepwood Mott. And so Theon, though, mixes things up. He says, well, wait a minute. I have this cool idea, which turns out to be a disaster for him. And so he sends his boy Dagmar, who Dagmar Cleftjaw thinks of Theon as a son, loves the boy, loves him. And he sends him to take Torrance Square. Well, to fake take Torrance Square. It's a feint. And then while the Winterfell forces are out to try to rescue Torrance Square, he takes Winterfell. Boom. And then somehow, completely unexplained in the text, Dagmar actually succeeds in taking Torrance Square. We don't know how. We don't know how it happens. Maybe the forces like turned around and then took the Torrance Square, like everybody else, to try to retake Winterfell. But whatever the case, Dagmar takes Torrance Square. Now, the Clash of Kings plot then occurs. Theon is the forces from that went to go take Torrance Square, led by Roderick, turn around. They gather the remainder of the northern forces and surround Winterfell and threaten to kill Theon. And then out of nowhere, the Bolton forces come and we've got Ramsay hidden as Reek and all these sorts of things. And Theon gets captured. The northern forces get destroyed. Theon gets pulled to Winterfell. However, unbeknownst to all of us, there is a secret character who is left behind in a tree, which doesn't really make sense because the direwolves don't smell him at all. But maybe their noses were too filled with ash and fire and whatever. But nonetheless, Wex is left at Winterfell. Now, so this is our situation at the end of A Clash of Kings. Theon gets pulled off to the Dreadfort. Asha, she goes back and forth to the Iron Islands. Dagmar at Torrance Square. Victarion at Deepwood Mont. Now, and I always think this is really funny. Now, say you're Wex. Say you're a little boy of 12. Okay? You've been traveling with, for weeks, you've been traveling with Dagmar Cleftjaw and Theon's people. Theon's taken off. Now, if you were this 12-year-old boy and you've just survived that huge battle, according to the A Dance with Dragons, he just for some reason decides to follow Osha and Rickon to see that they go to Skagos, and then somehow ends up at White Harbor, which makes no sense because you're Wex. Obviously, you'd probably go to Dagmar, if not Asha. Like, you'd go to Dagmar. Like, that's just this kind of ridiculous. And we don't really know if he really followed up. But whatever the case is, we know he ends up at White Harbor. And then, so, here's our, our situation. Now, Asha has taken the Glover hostages, Glover's family and children, and sent them back to the Iron Isles. And we know in the Wayward Bride chapter that she pretty much comes up with this idea that she needs to redo the Kingsmoot after the failure of the Kingsmoot. And if there's a significant person that did not attend, you can redo the Kingsmoot. And of course, the significant person that did not attend the Kingsmoot is obviously Theon, the eldest son of Balon Greyjoy. I mean, it goes without saying. So she needs Theon to redo the Kingsmoot. And then we've got Dagmar Cleftjaw, who loves Theon as a son. And then we have Wex, who is Theon's squire. And we know that squires tend to love the people that are underneath them. So these characters, all want Theon back for their own, for various reasons. But Dagmar and Wex, probably what happened is that Wex went to Dagmar, and Dagmar somehow sent Wex to White Harbor. Wex didn't need to follow Osha all the way to Skagos, considering he was in that weirwood. He could have heard Osha talk to Lewin, and then figure out that they were going there anyway. So nonetheless, Wex is here, and he's helping Robert Glover and the Manderleys for some reason. What's his motivation for helping them? What is it? Well, it's never established or talked about, but of course his motivation should be Theon. And so at this point, eventually Theon is taken. Theon's Dance with Dragons journey. He goes down. Victarion leaves, obviously. Victarion, he deals with this. He heads up to Barrington, and then he ends up back at Winterfell. Okay, and then Asha is captured by Stannis, and she's sent on the Long March, but not before she leaves behind Christopher Bodley. So Triss is also added as hostages. Hostages that conceivably Lady Glover could trade for her own children. But for some reason, she gives them up. She gives them up to Tycho Nestoris. Weirdly, considering it's established in the Wayward Bride chapter that the only thing the woman thinks about is the only thing that she thinks about is her children. So she must be thinking something. She must be thinking that there's something advantageous to giving up Triss. And Triss and company are brought to Asha. Theon, escapes and is brought here. And, we've got this situation here. Now, all this together, though, you can kind of see a web of stuff that could be going on. Wex could have talked to Dagmar, who said, look, we're with you and we'll fight and help you if you get us Theon back. Wex says, okay, this is the deal. Dagmar Cleftjaw's forces will help you if we get Theon back. They go, fine, we'll get Theon back, but we need to get Rickon back, and we need to have the whole thing in Winterfell. And then, this is somehow communicated to Lady Glover, who releases her hostages and who releases Christopher Bodley and things like this. But the center to all of this is Theon, because Asha wants Theon, Dagmar wants Theon, Wex wants Theon. And amazingly, and I'm bringing back to like when I first joined the fandom and started reading stuff, there were a million people that were like, well, Theon's story has essentially come to the end. Like, we can just like accept that he's going to get like sacrificed to the werewood to feed Bran so that Bran can like resurrect Jon or something. Like crazy stuff like this, like Theon's story is done. He's just going to die. When Stannis says he's going to execute him at the end of the Theon sample chapter, he's totally going to get executed. Like, because that's how Ice and Fire works. Characters announce their plans and then they happen, like that's always what happens in Ice and Fire, but really, like, people were really talking about how like, oh no, Theon's totally going to get killed. And then Jon is going to, somehow everybody's secretly conspiring to put Jon on the throne. That all of these conspiracies going on in the North, because we have the Manderley Umber connection, because Manderley and Umber were building ships together, and then we have a Robert Glover here, and so we kind of talking to Manderley, and Manderley we know is really secretly against the Boltons, and so you kind of get this idea that like, okay, well, at least the Umbers and the Manderleys and the Glovers seem to be on board together, but this idea that it's all because they secretly got a hold of Robb's will, is kind of ridiculous versus like Theon. They need to get Theon back because Wex and Dagmar is going to play a role. Now, Theon is also important because Theon knows the ins and outs of the Dreadfort. He knows the back doors to get in. There's an entire like plot in his mind about like the fake escape and stuff like that. So if you're someone like Stannis or anybody else conquering the North, essentially, you get Theon, you get the Glover hostages. So let's get rid of all this and talk about like conquest of the North. Okay. So if you're, let's get a good um, want to get a good little thing to pop on here. This one all right? Ugh. No, it's got the little checkerboards. That sucks. Come on, what's going on here? No. Let's get a good one. Stannis Ice and Fire Wiki. Come on, you got it. They got it. They got it good. They got something here. This one? Yeah, there we go. All right. So say you're Stannis and you're interested in conquering the North. Okay, so first of all, Theon knows the Dreadfort. So you can conquer the Dreadfort with Theon's knowledge. Okay? So what two? If you get Theon, you get Torrhen's Square. Because Dagmar Cleftjaw is totally into Theon. If you get Theon, you get back the Glover hostages because Asha wants Theon. And so you get the Glovers. Okay. Now, if you get Rickon at the same time, which is what Davos is doing, you get Manderley, you know, and you get Umber. Right. So and you get Umber. So at this point, like Theon is so important that he secures you essentially the entire North. Now there's incidences of like Barrington and the Rills and stuff like that, and you know, I suppose you could capture, if you captured the people that are at Winterfell, you know, that would bring them in too because you'd have the lords. But nonetheless, I mean, there's a few outliers, people that didn't show up, like the Flints of Widow's Watch and things like this, Flints of the Fingers. There's of course like Howland Reed and stuff like that. But for the most part, though, you've secured everything. And so I never, even reading like a really great analysis of the North, like Cantu's, he doesn't really talk about the Ironborn too much. Certainly none of these Grand Northern conspiracies talk about the Ironborn because everybody's obsessed with Robb's will and these things. But, you know, really it is about Theon. The whole thing is about Theon. And the North story is told through Theon's eyes or Asha's eyes. So I never understood why like people never really put in the real connection that Dagmar. And when they talk about like Stannis taking Winterfell, they never talk about Dagmar being right frickin' there. He's right frickin' there. Like, what's Dagmar gonna do? He's right frickin' there. Dagmar's got to do something, you know. Anyway, that's why the Ironborn are so important to the North. I hope that was a fun use of the map here. I hope people liked that. Okay, alrighty. Where are we? Could a faceless man impersonating a dragon rider be able to ride a dragon? I don't think so. That seems like that seems a bit far, right? Like, you know, it's not the face that allows like the dragon to connect with you. It's the telepathic connection, and we know this. We know this from Dany's perspective. Like Dany is controlling or is controlled by Drogon. You know, that connection happens at Daznak's pit from afar. She feels it. She feels uncomfortable, and sort of a parallel to Jon being connected to Ghost, you know, at the same time at the end of A Storm of Swords and stuff like this. Now, and also if it were the case that you'd put on a face and then all of a sudden you'd no longer have that connection, or you'd create a connection, then we would have seen the inverse with Arya. that she, when she puts on her blind Beth persona, that she would, or her Mercy persona, that she wouldn't be able to connect with Nymeria because she's these other characters now. And Mercy and Blind Beth never had a connection to a werewolf, a werewolf, to never had a connection to a direwolf. So like, but she does. She's like actively skin changing as Mercy and actively skin changing as Blind Beth. So I would say no. It's the person underneath. It's the essence, not anything like that. Um, does Theon die in Wynn's fanfic or real book? No way is Theon dying anytime soon in anybody's story. Theon's too good of a character. He's too interesting of a character. You'd never kill him off. But not in Wynn's. No, 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 no. Like Theon's in it for until the end. He's just too fascinating of a character. There's a lot of people that would die before Theon in my mind. I mean, even if we're going with the show, like as an example, Theon makes it pretty far. You know, he makes it all the way to the middle of eighth season. And if I were to write it, I would have had him go further. But uh, but why would you kill such an, like, the real thing is like, if a character is super interesting, they don't get killed. Like, look at Victorian. Victorian, he was on the chopping block, but then he became such a fascinating, interesting character to write for George R. R. Martin that he continued on. And that's really the way. Is the character interesting? Is it an interesting story? You don't cut off an interesting story in the middle. A story that's kind of, done, like explored all the way, you kind of end, you end your Ned and Catelyn kind of situation. Follow-up theory: Aegon the First replaced by a faceless man on Dragonstone after Dorne and Concealed Peace. So this refers to the so George R. R. Martin, he created this like ridiculous situation where he created these like super powerful dragons that should be able to just destroy everybody. But then he wrote in that somehow Dorne resisted them, which isn't really logical, right? It's just not so, but he had to come up with reasons. And so in this like long, exaggerated way, he kind of says, "Oh, it's the desert and the dragons can't find places to uh the dragons can't find places to eat or rest, and the people get into caves, and then they're shooting scorpions at them and stuff, and then the war stops because perhaps he sent a letter saying that and the fan theory is that Rhaenys was actually alive, and that they're keeping her alive, and that they'd kill her if they didn't end the war, and it's just silly, because the problem is that George is mixing his metaphors, and so it doesn't really work. So when you've got a situation like Dorne, and why Dorne is not conquerable, and you compare that to, say, colonial powers or powerful powers in weaker areas that can't take them, like the classic case of the United States and Vietnam, right? The United States was unable to win Vietnam, and so because the Viet Cong were hiding in different places and picking us off one by one, and it was just this guerrilla tactics kind of situation. The problem with that is it doesn't really like work when you're talking about like ancient times. Like the United States, when the United States was fighting Vietnam, the United States was still killing 10 Viet Cong for every American that was getting killed. Like, it was still like a slaughter. However, the goal of Vietnam was to establish a stable democratic state in the South for the South Vietnamese. And the United States public wasn't really behind that goal, or was not behind that goal enough where they were willing to sacrifice soldiers for that cause. It's the same with like, the Afghanistan. Like the goal is to establish a democratic Afghanistan, um, and the United States is not willing to sacrifice the money and the people and the time and the effort to just keep this going forever. Um, and so, but the war was like Vietnam and Afghanistan. It was never conquest. Like it was never conquest, and they were, and considering that the dragons are a metaphor for nuclear weapons, like it was like they were not being used. Like if the United States' goal was conquest, and they were just like carpet bombing like Vietnam with nuclear weapons, like yeah, they would have freaking won. Like obviously it would be an irradiated mess. Like it would, and it was just like that would be the end of it. Like it would be, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was to establish a democratic South Vietnam, like and to like, to for the benefit of the civilians and our own soldiers and things like this. It's not the same. It's not the same as like Aegon's conquest. It's not the same as like the cold, times of the Middle Ages, the fake Middle Ages, where you're just slaughtering people and lords don't care, okay? Because it's not a democracy. So like the metaphor doesn't work. It doesn't work, like the guerrilla warfare thing, like because there's, if it's just about killing people, like they would have just gone and killed people. And this is their mindset. Like, we don't care about the little person. Like, I'm just going to let everybody die. If Aegon were a character, if like Aegon the Conqueror were like, oh, I just can't let all of these soldiers like die this pointless war to conquer Dorne. Like, oh, what about next election cycle? Like, what will people think? Like, no, like it's silly. The whole thing is silly. Like, not being able to conquer Dorne with dragons. It's a silly concept, and somehow relating it to like the United States' like failures in Vietnam. It's like ridiculous. But no, I don't think Aegon could be replaced by a faceless man, because he was still flying his dragon after that. I think, wasn't he still flying his dragon? Like, so I think it'd be a little silly for faceless men. I mean, there must be a situation where he flew a dragon after that. I mean, unless it specifically says like he did not fly like Balerion after that, and was just soured by the whole thing. That's the only way it makes sense. But I have to go back and check if he was flying. Thank you, Jeffrey Lionkugel. Do you think there's a mafia in Westeros? Yeah, I mean, there's definitely organized crime of some sort. Something as like powerful as like the New York Mafia at the times of, or the Chicago Mafia, or the Chicago gangs, like during Prohibition times. I don't know, but there's definitely some sort of organized crime. I'm trying to think. I mean, we hear about. Trying to think. We hear about like Street of Silk kind of auctions, fighting pits, and things like that. Like, I don't know if those things are actually like sanctioned legally. Like, I don't think the Crown is like, there are legal fighting pits with people with filed teeth, as like part of the policy. They're just like, organized crime world does it, and people are paid off. What are Naga's bones? So Naga's bones are an interesting kind of situation. So on the Iron Isles, you got these big white curvy things that stick out, and obviously they're paralleled with weirwoods. Like, we're supposed to like think about that perhaps these are weirwoods, and some people think that straight up, like literally, they're weirwoods, but they're not really in the weirwood shape. And but here I'll put up a different interpretations of like what they look like. I mean, this interpretation of Naga's bones is very literal. That it actually looks a like an actual sea dragon's corpse, and everyone's there. I don't think the description of Naga's bones like warrants this that portrayal of them. I would say that like um if I were really talking about like Naga's bones, I would say it's something like, like something like this is probably the more apt, like more real situation. Something where it's like a little less obvious that this is an actual dragon, because obviously like George is always is always trying to fool us. Like people think one thing and it's really um something else, or here's another artistic portrayal of Naga's bones, something like this. And so some people think like, okay, maybe they were actually werewoods and somebody like cut them down and carved them that way, or maybe just over time like the werewood trunks like just got to look that way, or maybe they actually go straight up and don't curve. But I think it's also quite interesting that Naga's bones could look like a ship under construction. That it is not a skeleton of a dragon, but an actual skeleton of a ship. And that, the reason I think this is a compelling argument is that we have another ship, the sand ship, down in Dorne that seems to be a big beached ship of some sort. And so, it kind of seems like there was an older previous society that was building large ships. Maybe the wood that they used for the ships was werewood. Maybe it wasn't, but nonetheless, like I think a more compelling idea is that they're not the bones of Naga, but that they're actually like a ship, like an actual ship's um, uh, like skeleton. I mean, some people just think that, oh, it's a circle of werewoods like the Isle of Faces or something, or a circle of werewoods like you find in the north. Like that's certainly the simplest explanation, is that they're just trees, they're just old dead trees, and the circle of werewoods, people talk about them being Naga's bones. But I think that the ship similarity is more intriguing, just because what previous society was building these huge ships? Are they ships? Are they spaceships? Like what is it? But it seems to be some sort of like remnants of some previous um uh society. Now, one thing is people describe them as petrified too, which is also really weird because, and I don't know how much George knows about petrification and stuff like that, but stuff doesn't get petrified by the ocean. Okay, that's not how things get petrified. Like petrification happens from slow like mineral deposits of like usually hot springs and things like this, because essentially petrification is not turning something from wood to stone. It's the replacement of wood with stone. Small stone sediment gets put into a cell over time until the cell fills with the stone, and then the cell is gone, but we've got the stone in its place. So you're gonna find petrification like in places where there's hot springs and stuff, where stuff bringing up like sediment and various stone. You're not gonna find it in the ocean. But the world could have changed a lot, and it was really old and stuff, that kind of stuff. But I think the most interesting story is that it's a ship from a previous society, and they're confusing what it is, like stone, but it could just be, the most boring answer to me is that it's just a werewood circle. Um, Could the Theon's heir be in the Iron Islands already? I think we're talking about Theon's bastard. If Theon has a bastard with the captain's daughter, the woman that he was sleeping with at the beginning of a Clash of Kings, we know that that ship left the Iron Islands because the Miraham was later seen in a storm of swords. So they talked to Robb, and he says his next trip is to go down to Old Town. So, we do see a pregnant woman with a baby in the Samuel 5, but we have no idea if it's her. But we have no reason to think that he's on the Iron Isles. That baby, but there's not very much time for that baby to grow up. And there's king's moots and usurping Euron and all sorts of stuff. So if that baby makes it anywhere to royalty, it's going to be much later, and he's going to be even by story's end he's only going to be like 2. So tinfoil. Benjen, no description ever really given, is actually Lyanna's brave Dany Flint. Is this idea that like Benjen is really a girl the entire time, and that he joined the Night's Watch but being a girl, and that he was like raped and murdered once his like the reason the like Jorah Mormont and like a Game of Thrones and a Clash of Kings is like lying to Jon. He's like, Benjen disappeared. Why did he disappear? And it's really that the entire watch like raped and murdered him, and like the entire watch is in on it. Like Pip and not Pip and Gren because they arrived, but like everybody else, like Dolorous Ed, it's like, yeah, we actually like raped and murdered Benjen. Like what? God, that's weird and dark. Like, God, I feel bad for raping and murdering your uncle. Here's Longclaw. Here's my Valyrian sword. Your uncle was actually a woman, and he kept it from us, and we got really angry about it. We're gonna do a great ranging to find your uncle. Like, but or that Benjen doesn't, or that or is it just that like it's more simple that you're saying that Lyanna was reframed as Benjen and joined the Night's Watch in order to the thing is I think Benjen is actually described in the story of Harrenhal by Jojen and Mira. So I think he would be there. Also, there's some discussion about, or did Benjen stay behind because there always must be a Stark in Winterfell or something. But trying to think of like Benjen's really Lyanna the entire time. I don't know where he got the beard. Doesn't Benjen have a beard? And he's like when he's talking to Jon, and he's talking about how like he's given up. He's given up. You don't know what you're giving up. Like he's really like he's talking to her. Lyanna's talking to her own son the entire time. That like it's Lyanna. It's actually Lyanna who arrives for the meeting. Well, that'd be really dangerous. So first of all, like, so I'm gonna say that the big thing that makes the whole theory fall apart is that Lyanna, if Lyanna were put into hiding as Benjen into the Night's Watch, why would Lyanna go to come down to Winterfell just to meet the king? Because that would be Robert who would recognize her. That would just be way too much risk. I know people might say, well, isn't Mance taking just as much of a risk? But no, that's way too much of a risk to like have Lyanna show up disguised as Benjen for Robert's arrival. Like he could have like Benjen could have just stayed on the wall and avoided that. So I'd say that that's the thing that's the thing that makes like Benjen not Lyanna. Um, could some Vale Lords have been upset with Robert and Lannisters for naming Jaime Warden of the West? Um, could that be some reason the Vale Lords wanted to back Rob rather than honor or justice? Warden of the East, yeah. The so yes, in the first book, there is this issue of Jaime being named Warden of the East, and it being this sort of point of contention, which I always thought was a kind of a ridiculous thing because like people just follow their lords, they don't follow their wardens. You know, no one's gonna sit there and say I have honor to my Warden of the East. I'm gonna follow Jaime Lannister. Let's see. I would say the thing is right off the bat, like no one in the like everyone in the Vale like immediately rejects the idea that Jaime Lannister is the Warden of the East, and Sweet Robin is immediately called the true Warden of the East. But would that like name differentiation, and that's the thing, is in the end like they make this big deal out of this Warden of the East title, and then Lysa just like flat out calls out what a ridiculous, useless like title the whole thing is. Like she brazenly is just like, Jaime is not the Warden of the East. Sweet Robin is the true Warden of the East. Done. And no one cares. Like no one cares because it turns out the Warden of the East is kind of a silly title. But the whole thing is kind of a dropped plot on Warden of the East. It's a silly like the Warden of the East like concept, but that George invented is pretty silly. But I don't know if that's enough for anyone to go to war over, because it's just taken as such a minor thing after its initial like introduction. It's just later just downplayed to be such most the minor thing ever. Preston, are you transgender? Not that I know of. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's just that he has very soft skin. I wish I had soft skin. Jeez. Sorry, naming is word in these. Yeah, we got that. Yeah. The story behind how you became a Song of Ice and Fire fan. I don't think there's anything too interesting about the story of how I became a fan. I mean, I just have a rather, obsessive personality, and I'd read the first book, and then I'd watched the first season, and then I read the rest, and I just kind of wanted to know what was going to happen next. So I got on the boards because Dance with Dragons ends with a cliffhanger. And so I just kind of wanted to figure out what was going to happen next. And there was a lot of great stuff at the time. I mean, I talk about Bran Voss like being probably the biggest like influence in reading his stuff, and just like being amazed that George R. R. Martin had put so much detail into stuff. Because the first time you read something, you assume that it's a when you get a book that's as large as A Song of Ice and Fire, any of them, you assume that it's as fluffy and empty as most other like big page turner, like New York Times bestseller list kind of stuff. Like I'm gonna say a Stephen King novel, and not that Stephen King like isn't a great writer, he is, but it's also like he writes stream of consciousness, and there's not a lot of like themes or hidden messages anywhere. It's just he's going, and there's no stopping, you know. And he has an incredible talent for that. He has incredible talent. But Brand Voss was the first time when I read like Winterfell, Hugh Chloe, like, and he's like referencing back to stuff in Clash of Kings about, and I was like, what? Oh my gosh, really? Like they're building a fleet in the north, like stuff you just kind of forget. You're like, oh my god, like all of this makes sense. All of these, you know, and so you know, you really kind of like, it really made me appreciate the time that George puts into things. And over time, I kind of waver back and forth on stuff because like there's stuff that he puts up, you know, I'm convinced that George spends a lot of time out on, and then there's stuff where I'm just like, maybe I've overthought that. I think I've gotten, you know, I think at this point, like there's stuff I'm very certain he like spent time and focused on, and then there's stuff later where I'm just like, he was really just like, trying to finish this up, like, and you know, I've been able to kind of like tell and like differentiating that and really appreciating how much like craft George puts into some things and like how much depth and how rich they are was just a fascinating concept to me. I think for a while, like you assume that everything that George does is like perfect because he had put so much time and effort into it that you assume it's to everything. I think like over time I've like seen a few of the cracks and been like, okay, well, that he put time into, and this he half-assed, and this he put time into, you know, stuff like that. I certainly don't think George is as perfect as I once did, but I think there was a moment where I was like, oh my god, George's writing is so perfect and so detailed. I've never seen something that fits together like this. And then walking back from that, you know. In Dying of the Light, what do you think is the significance of the solitary bargeman for Dirk? So Dying of the Light is George R. Martin's novella that he wrote in 1980. And for those who haven't read it, it's a story about a guy who it's sci-fi, it's in space. And so it's a story about a dude who broke up with a woman, but when they were going out, they made a promise to each other to come if the other person ever like activated their whisper jewel, and then and so he's broken up with this woman for a while. He's still hung up on her though, and the whisper jewel activates and says like, come find me, you know. And he's like, oh my gosh. So he's like, I made a promise. So she is on the farthest reaches of the galaxy. So she travels all the way out to the farthest reaches of the galaxy where there was not that many planets and there's not that many people. And he goes to this old dead festival planet that the planet is moving away from its sun. So it's slowly dying, which is the dying of the light, you know. But there's more to it. The Rage Against the Dying of the Light is a, you know, it's a famous poem about how we treat death and the death of culture and stuff like that, and the death of our traditions and stuff like that. So it's a very existential book. It's a very existential book about what is morality, facing death, and like who are we? What's the substance of character? Who are we as human beings? And so the solitary bargeman is death. It's Dirk facing death, and the existentialists believe that, you know, you can only really understand who you are by facing death, and that the true measure of who a human is by looking at the elements of their life, and you can really only like fully be realized when you finally die, and all of the moments of your life are there to define everything that you did, you know, because there's this idea of you know, existence precedes essence in existentialism. So like in other religions, like people believe that like you have a soul, so you're defined by God shooting a soul into you, and that is who you are a soul. And so and some people are like, oh, I've done nothing but crap in my life, but deep down I'm a good person. An existentialist would say that's bullshit. Like, existence precedes essence, meaning you exist, but the essence of who you are, what defines you as a character, is all the things that you do in life. Like, you get to define who you are. You choose that. This is the whole point of like Jamie's page on the book. Like, he gets to fill the story with whatever it is. So, I don't think that the solitary bargeman is anything like too deep. The solitary bargeman is death. And at the end, like, the bargeman, he kind of conflates the bargeman with Brendan Braith at the end, because Brendan Braith represents his death, and there's a big thing of him like liking Brendan Braith in the end. Like, he's very happy. Well, I mean, he's not happy, but he like accepts that like Brendan Braith is a good person, and he accepts facing Brendan Braith because he agreed to duel Brendan Braith, and things like that. But it's a beautiful book. I really like Dying of the Light. It's got its flaws. It's got its big flaws. There's definitely some wandering around doing nothing in the middle. George does not know how long a kilometer is, which is hilarious. Like, it's hilarious how bad George is with distances. Like, outrageous. Like, a man walking like an entire morning and then afternoon and only going 1 kilometer. Like, just hilarious stuff. But I just think, and plus the solitary bargeman, the bargeman is of course like Charon from like Greek mythology. He just kind of represents death. But the facing of death defines who you are, in this existential sense. So he has to face the bargeman to know what kind of character he is, and that's what the entire story is about. Because he's facing these people that believe human beings are mockmen and stuff like that. Like, if you're constantly shifting your code, what are you? Like, do you have any moral code if you're constantly shifting it? What kind of human being are you? Stuff like that. Oh my gosh, so behind. Who's Dany's best marriage prospects in Westeros for alliance? Ramsay, Theon, Robert Arryn, Quentyn, Trystane. I often joke, but I don't like not joke, that it is Sweet Robin. That Sweet Robin would bring in her Vale forces. I mean, the thing is like, who else is important? Like who else has an army? The only people with armies left, you've got the Vale, but they're probably going to be like going for Aegon, so they're going to be fighting with each other. You've got you've got Sweet Robin and the Vale forces, and you have the Dornish. So, like, the Dornish are something, and Quentyn is something, but Sweet Robin is something as well. And the if Quentyn ends up dying or is dead, Trystane is always an option, though he's already betrothed to Myrcella, and that can't be broken without the High Septon. So that's a problem. But Theon doesn't. I mean, it's a long time till Theon has any prospects of having any power. He'd have to go back to the Iron Islands and win a Kingsmoot and stuff like that. So I do think it's probably Sweet Robin or Quentyn. Or maybe a Hightower, like that could be a possibility as well. But, hey, Preston, can't watch at work, but I always watch back and love these streams. I'm from Sydney. Have you ever been? I've actually never been to Australia. I've been to New Zealand. I've been to East Timor. Been to Indonesia, but never Australia itself. It's one of those countries where I'm like, I can always go later, and then you put it off, It's like, I don't know if anybody's ever like spent time in New York City, but like a lot of people will spend years there and they never go to the Statue of Liberty because they're like, I should always go there, and then they never do. Could Wex have been controlled by the werewood? I mean, it's always a possibility that Wex could have been controlled by the werewood, but it's I mean, you end up in those situations where it's like, but doesn't that remove his agency and like his whole relationship with Theon that they built up over Clash of Kings and stuff like that? Yeah. So it's just So it's just kind of that. Um, so, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I suppose he could be controlled by werewolves, but um, it's I'm just trying to think like, is he giving up? He's giving up Rickon for trying to get Rickon back for some reason for Bran. I mean, it's always a possibility. Um, I would not call them grifters, but true believers. Not all of them are right wing, but some of them just made that women are less sexualized in Western media today than 5 years ago. For some, that's all it is. Um, Let me think about this for a second. The thing is I'm trying to think like what like when we this topic comes up a lot, and a lot of people get really angry because I end up bashing some of their like favorite YouTubers. Um, so my problem with grifters is how they frame women and how they frame feminism, um, and what they think it is. Okay, so feminism, let's start with this, is the belief that there are negative things in society that hurt women that should be removed. That's kind of the like how feminists define it. Now, the everyday kind of belief about feminism is just men and women are equal. Well, it's not really like what it is, but like because like you take the number one issue of feminism. Okay, the number one issue of feminism in America that you cannot divorce from feminism is abortion and reproductive rights. Okay, and this isn't just me. Like you can go to the freaking National Organization of Women. You can go to their website, and which is the largest feminist organization in America, and it's about reproductive rights. Okay, so my problem with like grifters and why I think they're harmful is when they see something like, let's say like they watch Ahsoka and they're like, what's this show with a bunch of like girl bosses, freaking feminists, this conspiracy of trying to get feminism into media. And it's like, if there were a feminist conspiracy, they wouldn't be focusing on trying to put girl bosses in Star Wars shows. They would focus on real issues. The number one issue that affects women in America, reproductive rights. Like that's what they would focus on. And yet, like, how often do you actually see abortion portrayed in media? Hardly ever. Even though it's a huge freaking deal. It's a huge freaking deal for our society. It's a huge freaking deal for women. So there's this huge disconnect where a grifter will go, I saw a woman like being the star of something. There must be those damn feminists, and they get people to think feminists are bad. Like even when I talk about like Carmine, who is a feminist in my belief, in like having like knowing him and talking to him, is not going to be like, is reluctant on camera to be like, I'm a feminist, because people get connotations about what that is. And the problem is that those connotations are built by these like grifters and such. So I don't think any of them like, and I would love, I'd love to have a conversation with these grifters. Like you sit them down and be like, okay, do you really believe that there is a conspiracy of so-called feminists trying to control like the narrative of media? You think there's this huge like liberal agenda and the message, and it's like, if there were a liberal agenda, why are they spending months and months and months trying to destroy a union? Like, doesn't the writer's strike disprove the entire like narrative that there is this huge liberal agenda, like trying that Kathleen Kennedy and everybody are just about, are just pushing like this big leftist narrative because they're communists. Oh yeah, but let's destroy the union. Like like it's all like does not fit together cohesively as an argument. Um, Now, as for like, are women less sexualized in Western media today than 5 years ago? I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, there's a show on HBO called The Sex Lives of College Girls. Like, um, there's a lot of sex on TV. I mean, it's not going away anytime soon. I mean, we just saw like, you know, uh, Rhaenyra humping around. Uh, yeah, like we saw Rhaenyra go to an orgy in House of the Dragon. Um, lots of sex. Wonder Woman was. I mean, I don't know when that movie came out, but it's hard to measure. Hard to measure how much sex there is on TV. But I think there's plenty of sex on TV. Sex sells. People aren't going to go away from what sells. What's in media is what brings money. And so like when people are like, why are there girl bosses in their Star Wars? It's because Disney is a markets to children, and Star Wars is a scheme to sell toys, and they're trying to sell toys to little girls. Like that's why there's girl bosses and stuff. There's nothing, nothing to do with like some sort of strange left-wing agenda. If there were a left-wing agenda, they'd be like, okay, everybody, you can all have, safe, safe birth control and abortions for all, so that so that you can live regular lives and not be destroyed if you happen to get pregnant and don't have to go to a back alley. Like that would be the plot of something like Ahsoka. Like Sabine would get pregnant and have to go to a back alley and have a botched abortion and would die. Like that would be the plot if there were some sort of left-wing agenda. like to a not, yeah, she's really good at land speeders and can go vroom underneath like a ship. Like that's to sell toys. There are many conspiracies, some pro Stark, just some. There are many conspiracies, just some pro Stark, some just anti Bolton, none pro John. Yeah, I could. That's a pretty good summary of the Grand Northern Conspiracy, because there's like the pro Rickon ones, and there's definitely like people that hate the Boltons and will support Stannis, but there's not really any conspiracies for John. Thank you, Stuart. I'm from Scotland. If you happen to see this based on your strong opinions on other subjects, what's your opinion on how Scotland would look had we actually achieved independence in 2014? That's an interesting question. It's funny because prior to Brexit, I probably would have not been for Scottish independence, because like, now keep in mind that like as a dumb American who's actually never been to Scotland and doesn't really know that much about the issue, like the focus of Scottish independence almost all came from like Sean Connery. Like Sean Connery was like it, and so like Sean Connery being this like weird, like odd nationalist who was just like looking for Scottish independence because he believed like in Scottish culture or something. I probably would have been like, is being part of the UK that bad? Like, being part of a functioning democracy with freedom of speech, and I'd compare it to like how I laugh at the Catalan independence movements in Spain and things like this, that I also think is like, based on nothing. Then Brexit happened, and I was like, oh, there's actually like now significant policy differences between Scotland and England that are not just about, ethnic pride. Here's the thing is that like, I'm not huge into ethnic pride. Okay. And so most of the people and Sean Connery, like, they seemed to me as a dumb American, they seemed to me that it was all about like ethnic pride means you get to have your own country, which is a silly concept to an American. Like, just because you prove you're ethnically different doesn't mean you should have your own country. But then Brexit happened, and I was like, oh, all of a sudden there's like a serious policy difference that the Scottish, to differentiate the Scottish from the English. And all of a sudden, I'm like, well, okay, now they have like justification for independence. And so had Scotland like actually achieved independence in 2014, they probably would be in a better place with regards to like trade and finance and things like this. And um, it would have made um, would have made England's situation even harder because again another border with the EU and stuff like that. I mean, the Ireland one is fucked as anything, but like it probably would have helped Scotland out with business and everything. But so it's I guess they'd be definitely be in a better situation because than they having not dealt with the clusterfuck that Brexit was and that is, and the destruction that it's going to do to the United Kingdom. So yeah, I guess in the end, like it probably would have worked out for them. But it's just like everything hindsight's 2020. Like in 2014, I was like, 2014, could you predict Brexit? Like I don't know. Um, Northerners doing own executions and looking in the eyes first is a holdover from checking for whites' blue eyes, forgotten but still practiced. Um, let's see here. I'm trying to remember if the the looking in the eyes thing is the thing I'm looking up. Um, hmm. Okay. The blood of the first men still flows in the veins of the Starks, and we hold to our belief that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. If you would take a man's life, you owe it to him to look into his eyes and hear his final words. And if you cannot bear to do that, then perhaps the man does not deserve to die. Um. By the way, it's such a funny little quote because like Garrett didn't deserve to die, and Ned freaking looked in his eyes, heard his last words, and still killed the guy. Nonetheless, did he even like look into his eyes, or does he say this lip service? Um, I mean, it's a nice idea about the checking for blue eyes, but um, what do the whites have a final last words? I mean, it's funny that it's like connected to the final last words. Like, would whites have final last words? You know, that's the only thing that gives me pause about it. Like, it's a nice thing. I mean, also like checking the whites in the eyes. I mean, I think they glow blue, and everybody's like, "Oh God, it's a white." It's pretty obvious that it's a white. So I mean, it's a neat little thing. I don't know. I don't know if anyone actually like if George actually thought about it because I don't know if it really goes with the other aspects of the sentence. To hear his final words, for example, and not being able to bear to do that. Um, 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 what is Euron's plan? What is Euron's plan? Euron had a foothold in the north and then abandons it to raid Oldtown and then sends Vic to bring Dany. Why? Um, so what we know about Victarion's plan, I mean, Euron's plan, is um, the only kind of hint. I mean, the only hint we have on Euron's plan really comes from Roderick the Reader. And so when Euron takes the Shield Islands, he he lets the Ravens go to warn the Tyrells to come defend them. And Roderick notes this and is like, Euron wants the Tyrells to come. He wants that distraction. From so it does seem like he's got some sort of plan, like starting with the taking of the Shield Islands, of pulling in, I don't know, either the Red Wines or the Tyrells. Like that's fully part of his plan, is to bring them over. Now maybe it's just the Red Wines, and he already has the plan from to bottle them up in the straits and collect blood and do the Kraken thing, and then totally dominate the sea, and it was all for that. Um, and then he knew that from the beginning. The odd thing is that he legitimately seems frustrated when everybody's like, "Let's attack Old Town," and so that, maybe he thought he could take the Red Wines in the Shield Islands or something, and do Krakens there. I don't know, but it does seem like from the beginning he wanted the Tyrells and the Red Wines to come get him. That he had some plan to take him out. And it does seem, I would say that it seems like he can take them out with blood and Krakens and whatever. Now the question is, like, what do you do after that? And I think it's like, well, once you dominate the sea, then you can leverage that for maybe a good alliance. And so it might be from the beginning. It might be that Euron is completely honest, like, hey, I want to marry Dany, and that was certainly George's original plan, that Euron was the one heading to Slaver's Bay. However, now we kind of get this idea that he's gonna marry Cersei, and we get this from the show, and the fact that, like, in the Forsaken sample chapter, there is a woman of flame, and it's ambiguous who the woman of flame is, and so you've sort of, your first thought is Dany, which means it's probably not Dany. So the second thought would be Cersei, wildfire, fire, whatever, it being her. So it could be that Euron's plan from the beginning is that he saw that the Tyrell Lannister alliance was shaky, and that he was gonna somehow destroy all the Red Wines and put the Tyrells in a weak position, and then make an alliance with Cersei. Now, timeline wise, does that work out? Like, Euron conquers the Iron Islands, like, in the middle of a storm of swords, when Joffrey is still alive, So it's like, it's quite it's quite a stretch to think that this was his plan from the beginning, considering that, like, marrying Cersei at the time was meaningless. Like, he would have to somehow marry Cersei, produce a child, kill off all the kids, something like that over time. And Joffrey is, like, marrying Marjorie. The break with the Tyrells didn't happen, so it all kind of doesn't make sense, does it? Like, timeline wise, that he had a plan. So, if to marry Cersei, so it seems like he must have been honest, that he really thinks Victarion is going to come back with Dany, with her dragons, like, or it's some, visions from the Three-Eyed Crow kind of stuff. But, like, it seems like his plan, the timeline wise, it seems like he's being honest, that he really just wants to marry Dany, and he's going to have this huge fleet and total, like, sea control of Westeros, and that's his plan. And that maybe he'll shift it to Cersei, but he seems honest in his desires to marry Dany. Night's King in House of the Dragon. A, yes. B, no. C, please God, no. So this is the big news. White Walkers are seen in spy photos that they're going to be there. I'd like to see. Let's see if we can pull up these spy photos. Let's see here if I can find. Are they just on?
Hi there.
Let
We
me
just
let me
got
pull
kind
up.
of a
I'm
big
pulling
leak
up
for how.
Dragon Demands. Let's see if he has any. Here we go.
Reputation for clickbait like.
Are there any pictures? Any pictures? I don't know. Um, so the spy photos seem to show. All right. So what we're looking at is I don't know if it's like it seems to be some like concept art that somebody saw on the wall here, and that someone took a photo of, and then we know that the wall is making an appearance and the Night's Watch is making an appearance and stuff like this. So, um, at least undead, shows, so maybe I don't think they're going to show the Night's King. He should exist, right? In the time of House of the Dragon. Um, but it's I mean I don't know if I really like it, but we'll see what they do. Ryan Condal's, um has handled everything pretty well so far. So um so I'm gonna be tentative and say like seems intriguing. I'm open to it. I actually like kind of want the story to be bigger. I think focused around King's Landing was kind of a mistake. I wanted more of Lice and more of like the Stepstones and stuff like that. More of Old Town. I like seeing the world. So I'm gonna say that like not necessarily Night's King, but like the Night's Watch and the Dead and everything and House of the Dragon. I'm open to it. I think I kind of like it. I kind of want a bigger story to see more. The 2014 comedy Obvious Child is the only movie I've seen that tackles abortion openly and honestly. It's surprisingly good. Yeah, the um I think the only other thing I Veep had an abortion plot as well, which is also like something that happened. But it's like um I think someone said it happened on Girls and Dear White People. But like that's the thing is very you have to take these like HBO adult entertainment shows and stuff in order to like find the issues of abortion being handled. And keep in mind that like HBO is the taboo, edgy like network. It deals with like its shows are about drug dealers and carnival freaks and prisons and all sorts of and you know older women having lots of sex in cities and being sex advice columnists and stuff like this. Like HBO premises are always like taboo. They're always pushing it, and the fact that like you have to go to like I mean, Dear White People was on Netflix, but nonetheless, it's like it's like edgy because of the title. They're trying to be edgy, but it is really amazing how little the topic comes up. Um, Disney can be liberal and be against particular union when it suits them. I don't understand your argument. Isn't that how always people normally act? They don't always live up to their ideals and have slightly different ones. But then what's the conspiracy? Their ideal is money. Their ideal is money. Like I don't see any like like liberal agenda. Like they like when these grifters talk about um, media, they really talk about the message getting pushed, and they blanketly show this huge like this thing of like um, environmentalism and equality and um, here, I'll bring up the graphic. This vast liberal conspiracy that there's the message. That we're all, they're all trying to groom your kid with trans this and I'm trying, man. How am I not getting this this graphic? Huh. I really thought this would come up so easily because it has before, and it's just like. Here's one, for example. Um, Here's one, for example, and they'll like throw this out, and you're like, oh, victory, feminism, resistance, leader, frustrated, revolution. Now, when you look at the kind of stuff like even something like this, gender, shave, social, like where's abortion? Like, where's abortion? Where's reproductive rights? Like, um, uh, um, this one. Okay, this one thrown up by the grifters, right? That this is the message that is getting pushed by the left. Equality, uh, women, human diversity, safe zone. Let's work together. Okay? This is this idea that somehow like yeah, you know what feminists really care about? Safe spaces. That's what they really care about. Safe spaces. Like it's the biggest joke that like let's portray the liberal as like the the most ridiculous like comical perception of like what a conservative thinks, that it's some like person that's gonna get triggered all the time, that's like, oh, I just want to show like powerful women doing things, like, oh no, I'm triggered, like when when you actually talk about like National Organization of Women, okay, we can just go to the website, like it's really simple, like this is the reality of stuff, okay, like let's go to um this is the web page for the actual National Organization of Women, which is the biggest feminist organization in America. Okay, so we've got our commitment to racial justice, reproductive justice, 2012 accomplishments. We have some thing on LGBTQIA plus, ERA, um, which is the Equal Rights Amendment. You know, like that's what it's about. Like it's not right there. But like showing girl bosses, Like is not part of that. Like, Um, but yeah, do you like are people hypocrites? Like if they're hypocrites, there's not a big conspiracy. How can a conspiracy like go back on this principle, right? Like how can the entire conspiracy, which apparently, and people can't decide if the conspiracy is like the writers or if it's the showrunners. Like they'll be like, oh, it's Kathleen Kennedy saying the Force is female, and therefore, and rather than the logical thing that the Force is female is a freaking toy company who sells stuff to kids, who has a theme park where they try to get kids to come to their theme park, which by the way, the theme parks are the biggest profit makers for Disney still. Um, that somehow like rather than the logical answer that they're trying to sell shit to girls is no, they're pushing a liberal agenda, and yet they're just like destroying the unions, which is a huge thing. I mean, where is the justice in this, right? Where is the social justice in destroying the unions and trying to replace everybody with AI and making them get no residuals and things like this? Um, um, what do you think would happen if another time? What do you think would happen in another timeline if Ned had been picked up by Varys and revealed Jon's identity to him? Well, first off, like if Varys picked him up, Ned is not he's not going to the wall. Like like the idea is that like everybody that Varys is picked up gets sent to Dany, right? Or to Aegon. They wake up at Illyrio's and they get fed the spiel, and then they go on. So it's a so we'd have to start from that perspective. Okay, so say like Yoren works for Varys, and he's like, okay, we got they put, let's say they put Ned onto the cart, and they start heading north. Okay, what would probably happen is like Yoren, if he works for Varys, would stop at salt pans. They pop Ned on a ship, and they send him to Pentos. And then he ends up in Pentos with Illyrio, and Illyrio tells him like, hey, there's what would help the North. Dany, the Starks have a long tradition of supporting the Targaryens. This is a cause for you. You should go meet her. And they pop him on the Shy Maid, and he'd head down the river, and they'd get attacked by stone men, and whatever. He'd end up with John Connington or whatever. But I don't think he would end up with John on the wall. Now, say like Ned is thinking about this. He's like, oh my gosh, like Dany, Targaryen returning. Should I tell him that like John is like actually R plus L equals J? Like, I don't know if that helps, or would change his opinion or anything. Or if he'd get to Illyrio and he'd be like, no, I just want to go to the wall. Like Illyrio would be like, well, fine, you're dead. I'm just going to kill you then. If you're not going to help Dany, I'm just going to kill you. So it's just the what if of him getting picked up is I don't know if it like leads to Jon's identity reveal. Like, why would Ned at this point in the story reveal Jon's identity? He thinks Jon's safe on the wall at this point, Or he can just be like, look, this is really dangerous. How dare you? Like they have Sansa. I need to go to the wall, or they're going to do something to Sansa. He might, want to leave, So it might be something like that. But I don't know if there's still any reason. Like, what's the motivation for Ned to reveal to Jon his identity? I understand in the show he's like, I'll talk about your mother next time we meet. But he never does that. He never does that in the book. You know, even if he showed up in the wall, would he even like bother telling John? Um, what would happen is like Ned would probably show up in the wall and like rise to Lord Commander or something. Um, Theon Bran is able to communicate with Robin because of the werewoods. Will he do it in Windsor during spring? Um, I mean, I imagine Bran is actually like, I mean, at least time traveling Bran is probably like communicating with everybody in the story at this point. So I could see him communicating with Sweet Robin at some point. Um, Preston, you're very quiet. Can you turn up the volume? Yeah, I'll just get a little closer here. Let me see it. Let me see how my volume is. Volume's being the same. I think one of the things is there's a vacuum cleaner going outside, and that to like dampen the sound, like it'll take things down. Okay. Um. I watched Heather have an abortion on Degrassi Junior High in 1989. Those Canadians, man. Degrassi Junior High is a Canadian show, so they're talking about how like um, when people talk about these conspiracies, uh, you know, they're talking about Hollywood, right? They're talking about Americans, like in this somehow there's this huge American conspiracy for the liberals in Hollywood. Um, um, Yeah, I mean, Disney's agenda seems to be a hard no on workers' rights and environmental regulations and otherwise pay lip service to whatever doesn't cost them money. I would actually go further and say that everything they do is not to cost them money, everything they do is to make them money. So their lip service is to try to make their money. They're trying to market things to little girls. So like the way economics works and the way firms work now is that normally a firm tries to get profit, and over time under capitalism your profits go down over time because under perfect capitalism there are no profits. Under perfect capitalism, price equals marginal cost. There is competition, and competition like brings the costs down to marginal cost, and so you have no profits. um, and you find this in a lot of old industries where they're just like locked in, like doing something, and they can't do anything else because it's just like there's no profits in it. So so there's no reason for anybody else to get in because there's no profits. It's just so this is why like the same zipper manufacturers have been going on forever, because it's just zippers have been perfected, so it's just done. So, however, once you get kind of corporations and shareholders in situations, everything changes, because now a shareholder is not interested in profits or how well the firm is doing. They're interested in growth. They're interested in their share price going up, which has to do with growth. And so they're constantly worrying about not just like the efficiency of a firm producing something, which is like regular capitalism. They're now interested in that firm getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, it's not just that like Oreos, for example. Oreos should be done. Like everybody buys Oreos, they're perfected. We don't need to do anything else with Oreos. But they're like, how do we make more money? Well, why can't you be happy with all the money that you're making and just exist? Go on cruise control, Oreo. Like you're done. No, we got to keep trying to grow the market share. So they keep trying to come out with these like new fucking Oreo types, right? To market new stuff to people, right? Just they got to constantly grow, grow, grow. So it's the same with these like entertainment firms, right? They can't be happy having zero profits. They have to have more profits because their shareholders want growth, 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 growth. Because that's why I invested in you versus like somebody else. I chose this stock because I thought there was going to be better returns than on another stock. So you take like a firm like Disney, like, oh well, we're making money by focusing on this audience. Well, we got to have more audience. So like obviously they're sitting there. Well, we have all the little boys. The little boys are maxed out, and when I say little boys, I mean like, yeah, all the way up to 49 years old. You know, we got the boys. How do we grow the company? And the answer is, well, they grow the company by marketing to girls. Like that's it. It's as simple as that. There's no conspiracy other than the fact that they want to make some money. Um, Peace and equality sounds awful. I know. Forces female was a Nike ad? Was it? Was it first? No, I mean that's intriguing to me. Yeah, you're right. It was. There was a the shoe there, the Nike Air Force, and so they were trying to market the Nike Air Force to women, and so they're like, the force is female. Huh? That's funny. That's funny. But again, it's it's capitalism. It's trying to market something that normally goes to men, and try to grow their things. Um, let's see. The irony of American conservatism worshiping Jesus, the first progressive, and capitalism, the most powerful progressive force the world has ever seen. The it is true, and it's true that it's all kind of weirdly linked together, because I do legitimately believe that um, that abortion is at the heart of all of this, like everything. And so when because like I say, like abortion is at the center of feminism. There is no divorcing feminism from abortion. It is the number one issue of feminism is abortion. And so, but the thing is like abortion is largely a religious debate. Okay, the people that are against abortion are religious. The people that, or the people that think it should be legal, they can be religious, but it tends to be a secular argument. So you're talking about a religious argument versus a secular argument. And so I do wonder, and if I ever sat down with grifters, like I do, like the first thing I'd start asking them is about their religious beliefs, because I do wonder how many are willing to admit on camera their religious beliefs, um, or like go down that road. Because if they say they're not religious, then immediately it's like, well, wait a minute. If you're not religious, how do you feel about abortion? Oh, I don't care about it. Well, if you don't care about abortion, like why are you framing feminism as something different? Like because you're like hurting that. And if they are religious, like how do they think they would lose audience by like telling everyone that they're religious? Um, I don't think like I mean some of them would. I think like for instance, Shadiversity, the guy who does sword stuff, right? He's quite open about the fact that he's super religious. That's you know, so at least he's like consistent. but I do wonder about many of the others, like like the quartering or something, like like if you sat him down and you're like, well, explain your relationship with Jesus and how this relates to your YouTube career. It'd be a very very kind of interesting thing. Because it's weird, like it's hidden. People try to talk about other stuff, but when people are saying things like I have a problem with feminists, that's a religious argument. Like, oh, all like it's amazing because we don't think of it. People try to hide from it and call it like chauvinism or something like that. But it's religious. I mean, Andrew Tate is a very religious man. like um yeah, these things do go together. Um, which one of George R. R. Martin's Chekhov's gun is your favorite? Personally, mine is Benjen and Ned's bones. I mean, I love Chekhov's bacon, which I talk about a bit. Ned's bones are definitely coming back at some point. Um, I do think even I don't know if Rob's will is coming back. I don't know because somebody once explained to me that like Rob's will and that whole chapter was there to just establish the precedent of kings legitimizing bastards because it wasn't that's the first time we hear about it, and so then when it comes up with Stannis it doesn't seem out of left field, you know, that oh we can mention it in this chapter and then it can come up later in the story versus like it's, you know, it being this plot contrivance all at once. So I don't know if Rob's will was really actually ever meant to come back, but Benjen is obviously coming back. Ned's bones are coming back at some point. There's a few like I hope come back, like Stone Snake, um, you know, stuff like that. There's some that I know won't, you know, like the missing Umber army and stuff like that. You know, missing. There's a lot of missing armies that I just know aren't coming back. But I'm trying to think of any others like regular. Oh, I mean the tapestries. I think the tapestries are are a fun little one. I don't know what that's all about. Um, there's some that I wonder if they're forgotten, like the book that Bruce Bolton burns in A Clash of Kings. Like, what was that about? you know, like, um, so I don't know. Um, Blackfire, I guess. Blackfire. Um, um, hmm. Do you ever feel guilty for spending so much time thinking about A Song of Ice and Fire? I'm a fan, but always trying to rationalize fanship. Seems so trivial at times, and yet, um, it's a little, you know, it's a little different for me because of the channel. Like the channel, like has all sorts of like feelings of connection and building on things and like, you know, income and stuff like that. So it's a little different where I can see it as like a job and therefore it's like it's fine. Like you know, but of course like most people in the fanship are just really into something because they think it's fun. They think it's really fun. Now, you know, do you feel guilty that it's like a waste of time? But like everything is kind of a waste of time. Like yes, like they're spending time with your family or like doing charity work or something. Like there's a few things out there that like that are positive that like really build things. You know, you go downtown and you tutor less fortunate kids. Like okay, like that's you're you know you're working for Habitat for Humanity. You know, like yeah, but think about all of the things that people do to just waste time. And I'm talking like bench press, like internet porn, like, you know, sports, you know, like there's so many things that are just a waste of time. Like you and your friends like sitting around shooting shit, like drinking beer at the bar. Um, you know, so much like very few things are actually like for the benefit like the benefit of society and things like this. So for me though, I do kind of think it's like fun. Like I like the live stream. I like a lot of people like message me and say, you know, you really opened my mind to just how to view literature. And I feel really like great. I'm like, what? I did that? Like all I did was talk about stuff. And they're like, no, I never really like stopped and slowed down and started reading books slowly, and it really got me interested in books now, and I really read more. And or somebody, somebody's like, oh, you got, like, I got a message saying, oh, you really inspired me to start writing again. I got stuff saying from people saying, I was really depressed, but like really focusing on A Song of Ice and Fire, like got me out of this like rut, it got me into a community to talk to people again. Like, so there are a lot of like unseen benefits. So, like, bring up the sports. I just dissed sports a bit, saying sports are a big waste of time. But when you talk to people that, like, in sports, they're like, oh, but it gives people purpose. It gives people community. They get together with their friends and they have fun. People get exercise. It decreases crime, like all sorts of things. Like, so all of these things are also true. Like, this is a really fun distraction that has other benefits. Like, if you're analyzing Ice and Fire and looking for little details, you're going to be analyzing other things and looking for details. And I think George R. R. Martin's message in A Song of Ice and Fire is a good message. And I think, like, paying attention to those themes, like if you're paying attention to like reading and obsessing about a book that's anti-war and existential, and makes you think about philosophy and like politics and like human beings and what it means to be a moral creature, and what does it mean to have good governance, and who should be ruling, and what is the role of women, and like all of these questions like are things that we should be thinking about. And I think that it's, I joke that it's a waste of time, but it's not really a waste of time. I think that I've become a better person from having spent time talking to fans and like spending time reading this book and thinking about things. It's gotten me reading about other things. Like, I wouldn't have read as much about philosophy had I not like read George R. R. Martin's stuff and gone back to his other previous stuff and stuff like that. Made me rethink a lot of ideas. So it was okay. It was okay. Preston, thanks for your reply and your original question. Love the content you also that you make. Also that Carmine makes. Keep it up, and I'll keep watching. Come to Glasgow. I'll buy you a pint or two. Night. Thank you, Stuart. That was very nice. If the Targs had a prophecy of the others, then why didn't Ned believe in them? Why wouldn't this info be passed down? I think there is a large ongoing theme in Ice and Fire that certain knowledge is forgotten. If something is in a book or something, it's not necessarily living. And parallel to that, he has like this idea that things that are not forgotten but hidden, that people are remembering deep down. And so Ned is I didn't put this one up. So I think Ned is just a character who did forget about these sorts of things, and he spent time in the Vale, and he's more progressive than the rest of the North and stuff like that. And he's focused on other things. And that he just kind of like, he wasn't in the library reading those prophecies or whatever. He was more of a rationalist and thinking about politics and living a good life, and pleasing his wife and things like that. So I'm just trying to think of like where Ned would have ever been exposed to them, like certainly Benjen should have like during visits like told Ned about this stuff and said like this stuff is really important. Because it's weird that like Benjen is such a true believer, but Ned like is not really. I guess they just don't see each other very often. And obviously like Tyrion's a smart guy and does read all of this kind of stuff and decides that none of this is real. So I don't know. It's why did Ned believe in them? It's been so long and the knowledge is forgotten. I think the biggest contradiction is the fact that like some characters do, especially his own brother. It should be fewer. should be fewer people. But it seems like the Night's Watch is straight, like from the prologue, is straight up believing it. Like only Waymar Royce, who's only been with the Night's Watch a short time, like dismisses it. So certainly like Corin Halfhand and Geo Mormont and everybody else like seems on board with the fact that that stuff exists. So I think it's a bit of an error in George's writing that he creates this whole population of people that do think it's an important thing, and that Ned is a friend of the Night's Watch, and yet he doesn't really share their beliefs. So it makes sense because it's been so many thousands of years since that kind of magic has existed. But it doesn't make sense because the Night's Watch somehow believes it. Look up the College Humor Oreo CEO sketch. I think that's why it was in my head, because of the they get this new CEO and he's like yeah, we don't need to do anything, and they're like, no, we need to make new Oreos. Religion ruined U.S. conservatism. Yeah, I'd say that's true. It's funny because my mother, when she was in high school, was like part of the young Republicans, but now she's like nothing more than a big Rachel Maddow watcher. Greed, for a lack of better word, is good. Oh, this is the Gordon Gekko line from Wall Street. But yeah, this is kind of this idea of like what the firms are now interested in. That you gotta, this breakneck idea of like we gotta have profits. But yeah, it's like, for instance, here like BJ like puts this like feminism equals cancer. Like I don't understand it. Like again, unless you're like, are you somehow like religious and you see like women having reproductive rights as a cancer, like is that it? Like this is like, that's what it, like, again, you could replace feminism with reproductive rights. That's the primary thing. There's some other things like I mean, there's little things you start thinking about, for instance, once you become like a dad and like your wife is working and stuff, but like at your workplace, do you know where the lactation room is? Like what's your lactation room like at your work? Like check it out sometime, and think about it, and think about like how difficult it is for like a worker to like do their job and then need to go and pump and come back and have like have a little refrigerator to hold their milk and everything. And like, is that a designated place? Like by law, it should be if a firm is of a certain size, but like lactation rooms are of varying quality. But sometime like at your workplace, go to the lactation room, check it out, and just start thinking like, oh, what is a pregnant woman like? What is not a pregnant woman, a new like a woman that has a kid, like how does she cope with working? Where's daycare? Where's the nearest daycare? Like how does it all fit together? Like just start putting yourself in the minds of a woman, because like honestly, when you talk to like 21-year-old men about feminism, they're instantly thinking about 21-year-old girls and the girls they talk to, and they're like, I don't get it, I don't understand. I think we've like solved equality in America because in my group of friends, women and men like were treated equal. You're 21. Like you're 21. Like you also haven't been asking your girls, like your friends, like how long does it take you to get birth control? Like do you have to go to the doctor? What a pain in the butt. Like in some countries birth control pill is over the counter. But no, you got to go to the doctor, and are you on your parents? Are those girls on their parents' insurance? Like, and what kind of like, feeling does that give when, if their parents might find out that they're going to the doctor to get birth control pills because they might be on the same insurance and things like this, and bills come in, bills get sent to houses, because again, like people up to 25 in America, a lot of times their health care is still on their parents, stuff like that. There's these little things to think about, like how easy is it to get birth control? How easy is it to get an abortion? How easy is it to go to work and do like regular working things? And as again, as like a single guy, you just don't think about this. You're living your own life. Like women are like things you date and like hang out with at bars and parties and stuff. You don't think about it. You don't think about how difficult it all is. Um, Sorry, callback. It said when putting on a face that faceless men experience dreams, memories of the original owner. Couldn't this connection be telepathy? Yeah, no, it's a very kind of weird experience, and I don't have a good explanation to why Arya, when she goes through that experience at the ceremony where she gets the flash of memories of the ugly little girl. Um, like when they removed did they remove this ugly little girl's face, and did the girl's memories go into the skin, and then when she's touching the skin to her own face, so they transfer it in like it's werewood or something? um or is there's some other deeper aspect, but like because Arya is telepathic, she can connect to the dead body that's in the cellar of the freaking house of the undead. I mean, the body might have been close by or whatever. And why are the memories there? Are they going into the werewood? Do they have a werewood like there? Is that mask made of shaved werewood? Um, is she somehow connecting to the soul somehow? And how is that being done? Did George even think about it? Or did he just make that scene? Um, but yeah, but getting back to you're saying that if there was some sort of telepathic connection, or they had the soul in there, would they have the ability to then ride the dragon because they have the soul at the same time? Um, I mean, it's a it's kind of like a double connection though, right? I don't know. I don't know. It's I mean, you could probably like make an argument, but that you could somehow get it to work. But is the ability to ride in the memory? Maybe. Um, there's a lot of complicated things there. I mean, I don't know if George was even thinking about it all, and then it's um, yo, Preston, what's your stance on legal weed? Yeah, it should probably just be legal. I mean, drugs. We failed the drug war. There's just no stopping them. It's just you might as well just legalize, decriminalize drugs. It's fine. Weed should be legal, and everybody who ever is in jail on a weed related offense should be let out. It's ridiculous. It's just what an absolute waste of time and resources that we spent putting people in jail on weed. It's ridiculous. Um, I'll pay $50,000 if you can get the 5-year gap cut chapters. Grab the Winds of Winter if you can. Yeah, I mean the 5-year gap would be, yeah, those cut chapters would be like at the very beginning of A Feast for Crows or something. Yeah, I mean I would pay $50,000 for that too, but I would love to see some of his a lot of his cut chapters. The stuff that the Cushing Library is fascinating. If you've ever read the G stuff, the G stuff. Um, but it's fascinating, one, in the sense of like it's his unedited stuff, so it's a little rougher too, and then just like different ideas that he just eventually just like cut. George R. R. Martin has joked about aliens being a cheap way to end the story. Psyops? Could the others actually be aliens? Um, I would love to see that quote. I mean, I believe he said it, but I'd love to see his um I'd love to see the exact words. But yeah, no, we've talked about this a bit, about like how the the end of the story could reveal that the children of the forest, or everybody, is just like aliens. So, you know, either the humans are extraterrestrial and they landed on this weird planet, or you know, the children of the forest are aliens. I think it'd be more likely that the humans are the aliens. So then the children of the forest is like their home world. Uh, there's some that joke that like this is actually Haranga. So in the Thousand Worlds universe, so the Thousand Worlds universe takes place during and after a war with an alien race called the Harangans, the Harangan mines. And the Harangan mines, we never find out what they are. We know that they live under the earth and they have telepathic abilities, and that they use alien slave races to wage their wars. And the humans fought them. And so they fought them using an alien race called the Githyanki, who send telepathic messages to screw up people's minds, and they use large pterodactyl animals, like which kind of like giant bats. And I forgot the last one. There was one more slave race that I'm forgetting. I think they're probably a big brute like force one, something like giants, something, you know, some big angry giant race. But the idea that like the giants, the children of the forest, all of them like are actually like the children of the forest are Githyanki, the giants are the one race, and then that the giant bats are like the third one, and that they correspond, and that the Harangan mines are the werewoods or something else. Maybe the children of the forest are the Harangan mines, and that this whole story has really been about the Harangan mines the entire time. I don't think that's the case, because somebody did ask him once, like, what are the Harangan mines like? Did you ever come up with that idea? And he said, "Oh yeah, I did have that idea once, but you know, I just kind of like set it aside." I think if had it, the children of the forest and the werewoods been the Harangan mines, he would have had a bigger freak out about about it. Um, but um, but it'd be something. I mean, like I said, like, you know, finding out that there was an ecological engineering corps like ship on the on the God's Eye at the end or something, or just seeing a theta would be something weird. You know, I'm fascinated in how the theta became part of Game of Thrones show, and like what D&D were told about them, and like why they chose those symbols, you know, and what was it? Because we saw those, you know, for some reason we saw those symbols in Game of Thrones. I mean, you know, but not just the theta. They also had a swirly and a phi and stuff like that. But like, what were they thinking? You know, they just kind of said like those are like ancient writings, and you're like, well, what? Like, why you chose the theta, really? Um, do you think Ashara could have actually liked Howland Reed? They're both around with the rumors on Ned. They might be why he didn't send an army. Um, no, I don't. Uh, so George, when it comes to um, like relationships and love and relationships in stories, okay, George R. Martin is a realist. Like he, you know, this story that the hot girl is secretly going for like the nerd, um, is just not something George would buy. It's not his experience, you know, because he's the nerd, right? He's the nerd. Okay. And if like the hot girl like secretly went for the nerd the whole time, and this was like the issue, like um he that's, you know, he never had that. He's never had that. He's always had, he like there has to be like George is very into like a real story, the brutal realness of the world. Okay. How often in the real world, you know, do you have the hot girl going for like the nerdy guy outside of other things like power and money and stuff like that? I mean, you know, people bring up Woody Allen. No, outside of the power and the money and stuff like that. How often do you have the hot girl like just going for the nerdy guy, the hot popular girl going for the nerdy guy? Like that's not something that's real. and it doesn't speak to like the world, the world at all. That like nerdy guys like score the hot chick sometime. No, they don't. Like they don't. That's just not. That's not something that happens. Um, that's the stuff of like a romantic comedy, like some like lame romantic comedy that like the nerdy kid can get the hot girl in the end. And even then, it's kind of rare, you know. Like it's not like Breakfast Club ended with with Molly Ringwald like going off with Anthony Michael Hall, and it's not like Pretty in Pink ended with Molly Ringwald going off with Ducky. You know, um, it just didn't happen. I don't see how Ashara Dane would ever go for Howland Reed. Like short little frog eater. Why? Like explain that how that fits with the brutality of George R. Martin's world. George R. Martin is about brutal honesty, brutal honesty, right? You know, um, and it's such a I don't know, it's just such a dishonest, like dreamy situation that hot Ashara Dane that everyone's lusting after would be into short little frog eater Howland Reed. Um, why is Preston so certain that the Umber Army isn't coming back? I just don't see. Hold on a second, Carmine. Hold on a second. Where's my? Here we are. Hello. Carmine? Here we go.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
How could you say the nerd never gets the hot chick? You're a nerd and your wife is very gorgeous. How could you say this?
Am I the nerd?
Are you not the nerd? Are you the Chad?
No, my wife is gorgeous, but she's also like she's also the nerd. I mean, people have seen my wife, like the pictures of my wife, like people have seen like our wedding, right? Where my wife is like all like glammed up, but she's she cleans up very well. And look, she's a beautiful woman. I think she's beautiful. But I don't think like my wife walking down the street as she normally walks down the street, where she's wearing glasses, and all that. Like, she doesn't wear makeup. If people are going to be like, whoa, it's just not, it's not the situation.
Nice save. By the
Um,
way, you called me a feminist earlier. We gotta have
yeah,
that
you
conversation.
are a feminist. I know that you don't like to
Um,
admit it, but you are.
well, it's not that I don't like to admit it. I don't want to take away from leprosy snail. Jesus Christ. Do you want to answer? Do you want to go into it? Because
Sure,
you're
let's
right and
go.
you're
Yeah, I'd love to
wrong.
hear you talk about it.
Do you want to answer his thing first, or
Wow, which one? Somebody.
why are you so certain about the Umber Army isn't coming back?
Oh, the Umber Army. So when we talk about the missing Umber Army, I'm talking about at the end of A Clash of Kings. Theon is looking through Luwin's um, uh, Mirish lens, and he spies an Umber Army, and then it's never talked about again. And then we kind of establish in A Dance with Dragons that the Umbers are split up into two groups, like the Greybeards and the Green Boys, and that the Greybeards are on the inside of Winterfell and the Green Boys on the outside of Winterfell, because all the rest were sent south with Robb. And Theon's explanation of things makes more sense than there being a whole nother group of Umbers who are healthy and alive, hidden somewhere. And it also doesn't make sense to sacrifice your Green Boys, your next generation, when they're like healthy men around. Like, your Green Boys are your next generation. They're the last people that you'd want to put into war. And we see this around like in I mean, even let's take something like Germany in World War II. Like, their healthy men fight first, and then at the end of the war, they're throwing in green boys, right? Like, and old men. Like, you throw them in at your desperation last move because those kids are growing. That's your future generation. You throw your kids in last. So the fact that we actually see Umber kids outside of Winterfell, and we know that from the Asha fragment that they fight, and that Mors is killed, that those green boys were slaughtered, like, makes me think there's not a healthy man army out there, and that the whatever armies Theon saw in the Clash of Kings either was the Greybeards or something, and the Green Boys, or something else, or just forgotten about, or a mistake from George. But yes, let's get into now we're going to talk about Carmine's feminism.
You got to let me cook though, and you got to answer me. So, because I've had this conversation so many times before. But every time I get on stream, I always get a little nervous. So first I gotta ask you,
Okay.
how do I say this? How do I go into this? Okay, I've had this conversation so many times. I'm freezing up now. So I think calling yourself a feminist in 2023 is redundant, and I'll tell you why. For the people who are out who don't speak English, redundant, it's pointless. I'll tell you why. 120 some odd years ago, calling yourself a feminist made a lot of sense because the average opinion about a woman's place in society should be get in the kitchen, shut the fuck up, suck my dick. That was the average, right? 120 some odd years ago, blah, blah, blah. Now, the opposite is true in the sense where feminism and the core tenets of it have become so ingrained in our society that if you believe the opposite of what feminism is, you are called an incel and an asshole. Where 120 some odd year ago, you weren't called an incel or asshole. That was just the general opinion. The way I see it is like 1,000 years ago, the idea that the Earth was round was ridiculous to everybody. You were probably called a special name, let's say Earth's rounder or whatever.
Sure.
1,000 years later, the opposite is now true. You're like everyone believes the Earth is a sphere, and if you believe that it's flat, you are called a flat earther. So by that whole thing, sure, like yeah, of course I'm like, core tenets of feminism. Oh yeah, most people are. But I just think calling yourself a feminist in 2023 is a little like cringe because I think the general opinion for most people is that yeah, everyone, is on board with that. And if you believe otherwise, you're kind of a weirdo incel douchebag.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as you're saying, like, American society is becoming more liberal. It is, even though paradoxically our government is becoming more and more conservative. And so that's kind of the real problem is that still, despite the fact that society is becoming more liberal and having these ideals, like, there's still powerful people who believe the opposite, who are actually causing policy changes. And so I understand what you're saying, like, oh, it's redundant, but I like, that's as if like the war has been won, and it hasn't been won. Like, it hasn't been won. It's still really difficult to get these things, like paid maternity leave is not even a thing in America. Did you know? Like, it's just not a thing.
Right, but the United States is not the only country on earth. It may be the most powerful and very influential,
Right.
sure, but there's a very strong, sizable majority of people in the U.S. who, are like complete feminists without really knowing it. There are even a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Republicans, believe it or not, conservatives,
Oh, sure.
down to earth, like soil motherfuckers who are feminists without even knowing it. It's just that word has such a weird connotation.
Right, because
Like that's what I'm saying.
I don't think they thought it through, and I don't think they've thought it
Hmm.
through, and I think they're voting against their own interests and voting against their
Oh,
own
they always do.
beliefs. You know,
They always
I
do.
think all of these people are voting against their own beliefs. Like, the person earlier that wrote like feminism equals cancer. Like, I do wonder if, like, if you actually sat them down and asked them these questions, and we went through one by one, like, what's your belief about, like, should women be able to have jobs? Should women be able to have, like, reproductive freedom? Like, I wonder what those answers would be. And what's funny is that, like, I can completely understand and believe that there are people that are like, oh yeah, women should be able to have abortions, women should be able to get whatever jobs they want, and yet still have this belief that feminism is cancer. And you're like, well, what do you think feminism is? And they'll be like, well, girl bosses in my Star Wars movies, like,
Yeah, that guy
no.
was cringe, and you could tell he got rejected by the hot blonde in high school. Like we
Yeah.
we can disregard that person. They're not even a real
Right,
human
but
being, probably a bot.
it's certainly the but like I say, it's large enough that it's like the central tenet of like the grifter sphere on YouTube and stuff. Real quickly, I wanted to say the D&D Githyanki does come from George R. R. Martin. Um, uh, by the way, in case you're a Dungeons and Dragons fan, there's a telepathic alien in there called the Githyanki. It does come from, like, it's one of the things that was pulled in, but from the Thousand Worlds back then. Um, yeah, there's never been a copyright suit on it, but yes, but yeah, and the big bats were the Galactoloids. I forgot the big giant thing, but um, but yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, I use it just because I'm just like, why should I don't know, why should I change these terms? Like, I understand that, like, some people don't like it because they think some people don't like the term feminism because they think that, like, it I mean, for a while people didn't like the word liberal, and they're trying to rebrand left-wing thinking as progressive. And even today, like, people see leftists versus progressive versus liberals, and you're like, just
Hold on, I gotta correct something because as always, there's some people who always try to do the mental gymnastics with me. I'm not saying sexism has been solved because there's going to be a super chat coming up of some dumbass saying that. I'm not saying that at all.
oh
I'm saying
god.
the majority of people that you will encounter will not be those backwards weirdo incels you see on Twitter. Those people are the minority, and they always will be going forward. Um, Most of us were raised by, like, a lot of us were raised by single moms. Like, we saw the struggle.
Hmm.
If you see that, like, there's no way you're not really like a feminist. I just think the word is not necessary because most of us are. I never said it was solved. Obviously, we have a lot to go on everything,
Yeah.
but I just think, it's unnecessary to call yourself a feminist when most of us are already. That's basically the thing I was saying. It's like calling yourself an earth rounder. You don't need to say that. Everyone generally believes the earth is round. You don't need to say that.
It's just kind of weird when people use the term feminism as a punching bag. And so it's just like, I feel like I might as well, like, stand there and be the punching bag, because to protect the word and protect the movement. Because if people start thinking that feminism is bad, they're going to start thinking that, like, reproductive rights are bad. And you know having who cares about the lactation room at work, like, all these sorts of things that are very, very important. Who cares about, maternity leave and paternity leave? Like, these things that, like, are pretty needed, but whatever. Like I say, like, to the average 22-year-old, he's not thinking about maternity leave, paternity leave, lactation rooms,
Right.
reproductive freedom, the access of abortions, and the birth control pill. Like, he doesn't think about it. He's just like, I'm thinking about whether Sabine is given too much screen time.
He needs more screen time.
I know. Real quick, is Robert being a drunk? Is Robert being a drunk a front or exaggeration? No, Robert's a drunk. We hear a lot about it. About, like, we hear a lot about Robert being a drunk from the Cersei perspective of him, like, coming to bed drunk all the time, and her being able to, like, fool him into not having sex because she's you know she'll just give him oral sex and not vaginal sex. And him being passed out drunk so that she and Jamie can actually have sex in the bedroom when he's there and stuff like that. So, I mean, he's pretty black. He's definitely a drunk. um to have these, like, even these few anecdotal, like, moments of, like, being so drunk and passed out that someone could have sex, like, right there next to you and you not know, is come on, come on. You know, this isn't like we aren't talking about like 19-year-olds in college like binge drinking on a weekend. We're talking about a full-grown man who's ruling a kingdom. Like he shouldn't be doing this shit. Like no, he's definitely a drunk. Yeah. How many Molly Ringwald movies have you seen? I mean, as many as the next. Hasn't everybody seen all of Molly Ringwald? I've seen Sweet 16, Pretty in Pink, Breakfast Club, The Stand. Is that it? That's all. That's all of them. I have my criticism of the anti woke movement as well. Believe me, though we cannot call all of them grifters, and not all of them are right wing. I mean, I do think they're kind of like you say, like, and we focus on a few here. Like when we talk about like the quartering or something, or nerdrotic, right? Like, do these guys like really believe that there's a vast left-wing conspiracy controlling entertainment that needs to be stopped? Like, do they really believe that? And are they like, and even if you did believe that, like is that a bad thing? Like the vast left-wing conspiracy? Because there's two things together. One, you have to logically believe that there really is a vast left-wing conspiracy, and then even accepting that you believe there's a vast left-wing conspiracy, that left-wing conspiracy is a bad thing. So you have to be conservative, right, to be against the left-wing conspiracy? Because look, if you're left-wing and a big left-wing conspiracy, you wouldn't fear it, right? You have to be conservative and believe in this conspiracy at the same time. The believing in the conspiracy is so illogical that that's why I kind of say that it's a grift, because no one in their right mind would really believe a right wing, like a big left wing conspiracy in Hollywood. Like, it's a ridiculous notion. It's ridiculous. Okay, it's like QAnon level shit. And so that makes them grifters. The fact that like they're peddling this. And then they have to be conservative too, because why would you fear a left-wing conspiracy unless you're conservative? So like that's where I'm at, you know? So I don't see how you'd be like, you know, they give me an example of somebody who's not a grifter, who's like pushing this like anti-woke narrative. Or give me an example of somebody who's not conservative, who's pushing the anti-woke like narrative, because you know I just don't have any examples.
Well, Joel is never going to see it from your point of view because he, on some level, he probably agrees with it. Remember, grift is what's the definition of grift? It's like you're fleecing someone from their money, right? It's also dishonesty. Even if nerdrotic or quartering or whatever, even if they didn't believe it, they still have to peddle it because that's how their bread is buttered. That's how they keep the lights on. That's how they keep the food on the table. They have to keep going. Same with Candace Owens. Blair White is the greatest example of a grifter ever. She was on a panel with this blonde woman who ran for like governor or senator or some shit, and the woman was telling Blair, if you really wanted to advance conservative issues, grow out your mustache and go by your real name. And it's like, Blair, fight back. Talk shit back to her. And Blair just took it because Blair knows if she gives up the grift, she can't pay her bills. It is what it is. That's basically what it comes down to. Nerdrotic is like that. Does he believe all this other crap? Maybe. But he knows he has to be super on it. Otherwise, he can't pay his bills. He knows his audience.
Right.
Who was the guy that you were telling me about?
He is nerdrotic. Is like, you know, he's from Texas. He could be like a weird Christian conservative. He just doesn't talk about his Christian conservatism like in his stream. He could believe all that shit, but you know, who knows? I mean,
someone
like
in my comment section was talking about that guy. Who was that guy that put? Even though she had like 5 minutes of screen time, they put Arendir, the black elf from Rings of Power, with like cornrows, and they gave Disa like kept putting her in there. I forgot what channel his name was, but he made that his thumbnail because he knows his audience.
Yeah, that
he
was
knows
nerdrotic.
his audience.
That was nerdrotic.
Was that okay?
Yeah,
he knows his audience.
He takes all the black elves and dwarves and gives them gold teeth and cornrows and puts Big Macs in their hands. Yeah. Yeah.
the shithead in me wants to say that's funny because, but like,
I mean, it's funny to you because it's just so ridiculously over the top offensive. That's why it's funny. It's a dead baby joke, is what it is. You're like, you're laughing at it because it's a dead baby joke.
he knows his audience. He knows how to move. And to Joel, one more thing, homie. Take it from me and Preston. We've been doing this for what, coming on 10 years now. We know what it looks like. I know you haven't. You're not a YouTuber. You probably don't know. But take it from two guys who have seen it. We know how it moves.
Yeah, I mean, just like why would someone spend so much of their time um like focusing on I don't know, Kathleen Kennedy? Like it's just there's no like I don't know. Sports is a waste of time. Am I the nerd? Yeah, I mean it's fun for people. It's fun for people. There's sports can have a lot of complexity, as much complexity as anything else, and so you can analyze sports for a long time, especially American football. Like it's very complicated, like getting into the little bits here and there. And so people really like it, and they really like talking about it and stuff like that. So it's essentially another nerdy thing. It's just very, people joke about like, is there any difference to like there was years ago when I was in high school, there was a woman who was on a trial who insisted on wearing a Star Trek uniform every day for the trial, and I think there was another woman who changed her name to Commander Data, like her first name Commander and her last name to Data. And they say, how is the person wearing a Star Trek uniform every day any different than somebody wearing a sports jersey? And it's not. It's cosplaying, right? Like there's no difference between like wearing a jersey that has your favorite, that has um, your favorite player on the back, and than wearing than being a bro at a brony convention. Oh, the bronies are all gone, man. Bronies are. Do you miss the bronies, Carmine?
That was like what, 5 years ago? That was the whole thing. Chris Chan ruined bronies for everybody. I don't know if you know who Chris Chan is.
Oh no.
Oh, you don't want to know.
Yeah, it's funny. Being a nerd and everything. I've seen My Little Pony. I've seen some of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. I've not seen the whole thing.
Hmm.
I'm just very curious. And yeah, it's a pretty good show, but it's not, in my opinion, so good that I would dress up every day. And like the Wire is really good. I'm not dressing up like Omar every day, right? Like it was a good show. It was a good show. I'm not dressing up like Daenerys every day, right? So but nonetheless, like it was a good show. It was not a show like that you should be dressing up over. Um, but she was really embarrassed because her brother was a brony, and she's like, yeah, he like goes to brony conventions and things like that. And I was like, yeah, it's no big deal. I understand it. And she was like very ashamed of it, and I was like, it's no big deal. Like it's no big deal. Like relax. Like and for the most part, it was no big deal. Like it went away, and all the bronies are fine people. Um, when you talk to them, they were just like I really like the show because it pushes really good ideas like about like friendship and human connections and stuff. And like I was like, okay,
But
I'm with you
you should
guys.
also have some self-awareness that this, at the end of the day, is a kids show, and you probably shouldn't go to conventions where kids are going to be roaming around. You're going to be looked at weird like that. You should
Sure.
probably maybe start a convention for brony adults only, instead of attending conventions where kids
Sure,
are
but
all over
this
the
is all
fucking
not
place.
stopping the quartering from doing videos against Ms. Marvel. Like it's a show for little girls. Like it's a show for little girls.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's so fucking weird. Like, as much as I disagree with Brie Larson, on her rant a couple years back, which is what started the hate for her, she did have a point about like the
Hmm.
show wasn't made for you. Like the movie wasn't made for you. Like, yeah, that's true. Some movies just aren't made for everybody in mind. But that
Yeah.
doesn't stop them. We
Fucking
got to
My
make
Little
money. We got to pay
Ponies.
bills.
Why are My Little Ponies focused on girls? Yeah.
Got to make that money.
Mm, woke ponies. Um, if you were the leader of a Cold War superpower and the enemy launched a massive first strike that couldn't be prevented, would you order retaliation? Uh, that's a very weird idea. Like, what's the point at that point other than vengeance? Um, so I guess okay, I mean, it depends on the like, are we talking about if they strike America and America is completely irradiated? Um, the remaining power would then go and like conquer the rest of the world. So I think just in the situation, knowing that the third world exists free of either Cold War Power 1 or Cold War Power 2, I would want to eliminate the second Cold War power just so that all the remaining people on Earth could be free of both imperial powers. Um, Now, granted, like doubling the amount of nuclear weapons on the planet like is probably bad, or the amount of like like Cold War fallout and all of that would probably be bad. But like I don't know, like at that point, like I if Earth is already going to be irradiated bad, you know, knocking them out too, so that the survivors can be free from that power as well might be okay. Um, if it were a different question, like it's about killing everybody versus letting them live, that's a different question. But I think it's then I'd probably let them live if that was the only chance of humanity surviving. But just in the sense, I'd want to knock out the other powers so that all the third world, all the extra players can live free. Would be the way I'd go. Um, Hey, buddy, how's the Battle of Ice going? Also, do you have any theories on the Thens? They seem especially fleshed out and awesome. I've not really started on the Battle of Ice. Kind of working on the Battle of Fire because I was spending a lot of time on Barristan and things like that. But so I haven't focused on the Battle of Ice yet. But theories on the Thens. It is really weird that the Thens are given so much time and like what like the significance of them taking control of Carhold is a bit weird, and how that will play in later, I don't know. You know, granted this was kind of just like thrown in a final chapter that that George wrote near the end when he's like trying to finish wins. So we don't know like how important those thens are going to be, but and how important that marriage is going to be. You know, was it just one more thing to alienate people? Was it just a reason to bring mountain clans to the wall? Stuff like that. I don't know. You know, it's plus the fact that like Harry and Karstark is still missing, right? There's another like um Chekhov's gun. So Harry and Karstark, who is the heir to Carhold, or maybe the Lord. He's Lord. Is he Lord to Carhold? Yeah, he's Lord. Okay, he disappeared from the story, and so we don't really know, like, if he's going to show up. If he shows up, like Alice marrying a Fen makes no difference at all. Or maybe it'll make a huge difference. You know, I don't know. You know, if Harrion doesn't show up. So a lot of it has to do with like if Harrion shows up. Harrion, you know, I feel like Harrion should be what Harrion was at Maidenpool. Would he have been returned to Manderley? Does Manderley have him? Because then at that point, it's just like, um, you know, whoever Manderley supports. But it's um, or it'll go the other way. You know, the Fens, the Wildlings will start claiming everything. Start claiming everything when when they go back when they head south with the Weeper, the Weeper. Um, there's just not that many Karstark forces even left either. Bruh, Kevin Spacey acquitted. Yeah, that's keep in mind that like the we're talking about um not whether something is true, but whether something can be proved to a certain degree of past reasonable doubt. And so Kevin Spacey, yeah, no, his career is over. Everyone accepts that he was a horrible human being that he was, and he's acquitted. That's too bad. you know. But whatever. At least we got the motherfucker from the that '70s show. Karma, did you see the Ashton Kutcher Mia like apology video?
Yeah, that was yeah. You know what? Honestly, I was a little surprised. I would have as annoyed and fucked up as the whole as annoyed as I am with those guys and as fucked up it is. I think I'd be slightly less annoyed and it'd be slightly less fucked up if when they apologized they had a ukulele doing it. I think that would have been way better.
Here's the thing. I wish they would have just fucking been honest and owned it. Is you go, look,
Mm,
this is my friend. I sent a letter for a friend based on the person that we knew. I have no idea if it's true or not, but based on what I saw, this was our friend. I'm gonna help out a friend. I'm sorry, you know, you know, if he's guilty and he did what he did, yeah, he deserves to be in prison. But like, keep in mind that we never saw that, and he was our friend, and we sent a letter. Like, what would you do for your friend? Had they just been fucking honest about it, I would have been like liked it more than like we believe survivors and da 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 da. Just be fucking honest. Like your friend, your fucking good friend asks you for a solid. You know, of course you're gonna fucking do that for them. You know, this is your good friend. What are you gonna do? You know, if you
I
put them in a bad
dream.
situation.
I had a dream about that '70s show a while ago where in my dream Eric is very upset with Hyde for doing a crime, and everyone's making excuses for Hyde. And then the entire episode was a dream that Eric wakes up from, and he's like, "Oh, oh, thank God!" And Hyde is there. He's like, "Hey, buddy, are you okay?" And Eric's like, "Yeah, I had a dream that you were up to some crazy stuff." He goes, "Nah, that's just all a dream. Hey, by the way, I have something that would make you feel better." And he pulls out a Scientology book. I feel like I could probably
Oh.
make that into like a whole episode using 11 Labs. Maybe I don't know. I
What's
feel like
really
I could.
sad is so I see this shit on Twitter and I look at the comments and like the first comment that gets blue check marked all the way up is like,
Mm,
I bet I'm certain that this dude like crossed the wrong people in Hollywood because everyone in Hollywood is doing what he's doing. And you're like, oh my god, he like completely believes that like every person in Hollywood is like a rapist, like really everyone. Like Tom Hanks is a rapist, like Tom, like he's raping people right and left, like really, like you just name everybody, like every actor, um, you know, oh, oh, it's like the QAnon like lizard people thing is real, man. So many people just are into that, and they were like, oh, you know, hide crossed the lizard people, man. He crossed the lizard people. Um, mm, 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 mm. The U.S. is not the most powerful country. I don't know. I think it probably is by most measures of like military or economics, but there's some weird stuff I see. I mean, I get I get baited because sometimes it's just like it's up. Like this is the BJ. This is the guy that said that. This is the guy that said that feminism was a cancer, and he says, "LOL, no, liberalism is a failure." Preston knows this, but he works for the government, so he's got to walk on liberal eggshells. Does it do
it's
I
true.
sound like somebody who walks on eggshells? Like what was I fucking like? Um, but like liberalism, I don't even know what that means. Like what is a failure? Like what we're gonna be like, oh man, liberal, this was all a failure. This whole like freedom of speech, like giving women equal rights thing was a failure, and we got to go back to like the Saudi system or something. If we somehow like end up like Iran, like that's everything's gonna work that way. Like the thing is like you have to be against capitalism at this point, like if you believe that, because like how would you send all of the women workers home and what that would do to every single industry, um like to remove that, like removing female like ability to vote and like work, like they would crash the economy, like the entire world would fall apart. But no, it's all a failure. It's all a failure. Women need to go home and like child rear or something. It's just so ridiculous. Um, da, da, da.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you think this guy here gets laid? Like, you think this guy here has an actual real life? You
Well,
think
I
this
mean,
guy is like a
you
decent
can
human
get
being? Like,
laid.
he's
The
a
thing is, you can
weirdo
get laid by having really low standards. Like anybody can get
for
laid if they
paying for it.
want. You know, anybody can get laid
Yeah,
if
but
they want.
you think he's having meaningful, loving like relationships with anybody? No,
Well, he
he's a
doesn't
weirdo.
understand that. He doesn't understand what he's missing out on. He doesn't understand, like, you know, he doesn't understand that, like, when you're, like I said, I've talked about this before. Like, when we're, you know, we're all alone in the universe, and like the absolute joy of having like an equal to share the universe with, that you respect and that you're going through and, you know, together is beyond anything else. Like, you know, if I just had some subservient person to command around, I'd feel so lonely. I'd feel so utterly lonely in the universe. But he
You would
doesn't
be super
understand.
frustrated
He
watching
doesn't
Fresh and
understand.
Fit.
Yeah.
You would be super frustrated watching that show. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Um, every foreign country is not some barbaric hellhole with no women's rights, dude. I mean, there's a few that, you know, we got Sweden and Finland and stuff, and Denmark and Norway. You get like 2 years maternity and paternity in those countries. It's great, so that people can bond with kids. And so like you get a lot of like stay-at-home dads for a couple of years, like bonding with the kids. It's good stuff. But yeah, you know, it's um but you know how far we are from that. How far. Um, Believing in equality amongst humans doesn't make you a feminist. Feminism doesn't hold the monopoly on equality. That notion existed long before its creation. No, I mean, but we were talking about like feminism is specifically recognized. This is like the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter debate, right? Um, Feminism versus like equality, right? Like, yeah, all lives matter. Yes, Black Lives Matter. Like these aren't like contradictory notions, but Black Lives Matter is highlighting the fact that currently in America, Black lives are not valued as much as white lives, especially among, you know, amongst police, and therefore we need to address and work on these issues. You know, that there are negative things happening to Black people, and we need to remind people that Black lives matter. So feminism, again, like, it's not that, like, you know, women are different from men. Like, you know, like have they do have to deal with different reproductive issues and like having like rearing children. And like, so there are different issues. So like women and men are not equal, but having equal rights and affording equal opportunity, you know, means that there are certain things that women face, certain barriers that they face, that society like should be removed. Now, on the other side of things, there are barriers that men face that are negative that should be removed. Okay, so for example, a lot of you grew up playing sports, you know, and you get knocked down, and the coach is like, walk it off, you know, walk it off, right? That walk it off mentality among men, right? What do you think? Like, and we all have it. I have it too. Okay, we all have it. It's nothing. It's nothing. I can will myself past it. I can will myself. It's nothing. I'm a man. I don't need any help. How do you think that, like, down the road that affects you when like something's wrong? Oh, should I go to the hospital? Should I go to a doctor? Or should I like suck it up? Should I suck it up? Should I walk it off? Be a man. Suck it up. How do you think that, like, what kind of mentality does that like lead to when you're talking about human survival? Do you think that extends male life to have that attitude, especially later in life? What about binge drinking? It's really important if you when you're a young bro. Not so important now, but when you're a young bro, you got to be able to hold your liquor. And the only way to be able to hold your liquor is to fucking binge drink, heavy drink a lot. Show you're a man, you know. If you the guy who gets drunk after one beer, what a fucking pussy. No, I can drink a fucking 6-pack. I can drink 12 beers and I feel
I get
nothing.
drunk after one beer.
Yeah, you know, but like, cause you're a pussy, Carmine, you know. So like,
That's
So you
true.
learn to binge drink. You learn to binge drink to be a man. I did it. But what do you think like long term effects of like binge drinking? Like what do you think that does to the health of men? Right. So like we can accept that like both with men and women, there are negative things in society that we should work to remove. You know? So like I say, like a woman being able to like get easy access to abortion and birth control, like that's just something that'll make all women's lives better. It'll make men's lives better too. Like it helps us too. It's like allowing my wife maternity leave and allowing me paternity leave. Like they each help each other. When my wife has maternity leave, like that helps me. When I have paternity leave, that helps my wife. Like it all helps each other. Like it's these so it's not just like it's not that feminism is like thinking that they have some sort of monopoly. We're focusing on certain issues. There are things that hurt women in society, just like there are things that hurt men in society, and they should be removed. And if you believe that there are things that the things that hurt women in society should be removed, then you're a feminist. Like that's it. It's that easy. There's nothing like crazy about this. Like this is Preston Jacobs, like liberal, like like reasonable liberal. Like I'm not a revolutionary. I'm not for tearing down systems and societies. I'm for progressive taxes and social programs and like government making life better through like better programs. Like there's nothing extreme about what I'm saying, and that somehow people are like, oh man, fucking Preston's politics are fucking crazy. That somehow reasonable Preston can be fucking crazy. Um, Oh, Carmine wouldn't say the same thing about racism, certainly as a minority. Carmine saying sexism is solved is absurd. Come on, dude. Well, yeah, again, Carmine addressed this that he doesn't believe that sexism is
Yo, asshole. Point. It's literally.
solved.
It's
See how angry you made
literally.
him?
We're. I'm not angry. It's just like there are people, and you get this too all the time in your comment section. People will make mental gymnastics of what you say, so they can feel cued by challenging a content creator. We're literally live. Preston will not edit this. Go back and find me the clip, and I'll pay you where I say it's solved. Obviously, it will never. Racism won't be solved ever. Sexism will never be solved ever. You're making mental gymnastics here, and quite frankly, go fuck yourself.
But you're
Fucking
saying that
idiot.
in an East Coast friendly way. You know how like
Sure. By the way, someone.
Carmine and I joke like so for especially for people that are outside of America, like Americans we come in different like breeds in different regions, and the different regions of America have different kind of senses of humor, and so like and different kind of like mindset, and so like you kind of have West Coasters, Midwesterners, Southerners, and East Coasters, right? East Coasters from like Boston to Washington, we kind of like say fuck you to each other pretty easily, and it doesn't like mean that much. Like you're like go fuck yourself. Well, if you say like to a come from California and they're like, go fuck yourself. They're like, what? Why did he say go fuck myself? What was that? Like, and it's like, like, it's a very different mentality, like for an East Coaster. Like our humor is different. It's more sarcastic, stuff like that. So when Carmine's
I
like, go
don't
fuck
mean
yourself, I don't know if he
to
really
that
means go fuck
person.
yourself.
I really mean it. Go fuck yourself. You're an idiot. I would say more shit, but I don't want to get the video demonetized. You bitch. You're an idiot. I would say
No.
more, but wait till I stream. Then I'll say it on my channel.
He probably likes you a lot, Carmine. Just
Thanks for the
misunderstood.
super chat, you fucking weirdo.
Oh gosh, golly, Carmine. The term feminism by itself is a dichotomy that creates the idea between feminine good, masculine bad. It creates a certain point of view that deters from actual equality regardless of gender. I mean, this is hard to say because, like, semantics are in the eye of the beholder and stuff like that. So, certainly if you're saying in your mind you don't like the term feminism because you think it's an insult to masculinism or something. You think it's an insult to masculine. A lot of people don't like the term like toxic masculinity for this reason, or they don't like Black Lives Matter because it sounds like they're going Black Lives Matter, not White Lives Matter, or something like that. It's somehow an insult to your whiteness and stuff like that. And to all of this, I would just say, just relax. Just relax. You're being sensitive is what I'm saying. Uh, all of these terms, yeah, maybe somebody is, maybe some people, I don't think it was the case with feminism, but a lot of terms out there, they are trying to get your goat. They are trying to rile you up. Okay. Certainly they chose the name Black Lives Matter initially because the name riled people up and it got attention. Of course they did. It's the same when you hear these terms like toxic masculinity or white fragility or whatever. Of course they're trying to rile you up. Of course. And then all you got to do is just water off a duck's back, man. Once you recognize, of course they're trying to rile you up. Stop it. Stop taking the bait. Stop taking the bait. Stop getting riled up. Okay? If you think the reaction to, feminism is an attack on your masculinity and to get insecure about it, dude, you gotta have thicker skin in life, really. That's probably not what they were thinking of. So I accept plenty of people do have this attitude, and I'm saying have a thicker skin, relax. It's not an insult to you. Feminism is for the benefit of men. Okay? It's for the benefit of men. Feminism helps men. Okay? And, by helping women, you're helping men. And I want to get that in. So, it's not an attack. You're not creating a dichotomy, okay? Just sit there and be like, look, I'm a guy, I'm a feminist, I'm fine. There, done. In my circles, in my, in Carmine's circles, it's not a big deal. We're fine. Feminism is great. It's great. You know what? Things I love? Women having access to birth control. Oh my God. It's so fucking good. It's so fucking good. Carmine, don't you love that too?
Yes.
Yeah. And you know why? Because condoms fucking suck. Okay. Yeah. So look, all these things help. Feminism's great. Feminism's great. I'm getting down. Somebody's no, condoms are great. What? Everything feminism produces helps men. Okay? When your wife can get maternity leave, that helps you. When you can get paternity leave, that helps you. That helps her. It all helps each other. When women are in the workforce and get educated, you get to relate to them better. You get a better partner in the universe. You get a more exciting partner. When women are sexually liberated, you get to have sex with them. It's fucking great. Oh my God, it's fucking awesome. You know what sucks? Being in a place where the women don't fuck. Oh my God, that sucks. Okay? You do not want to live there. You do not want to live there. Because you know what? Sex is great. Sex is great. Would Robert have actually killed Cersei's kids? No. Robert is a big softy in the end. Robert would have not have killed. I understand all these people's fears about it. And it's just it's I understand everybody's fears about it because this is a cruel world. But from everything that we've actually seen about Robert in the end, he was a big softy. I mean, maybe it took Ned at the end. I mean, keep in mind that Rhaegar, he fully went to his deathbed believing Rhaegar raped and murdered Lyanna, and that the Targaryens killed Ned's father and killed his brother, killed everyone he knew. And in the end, Robert never went through with killing Viserys, and like he in a fit of anger, he heard about Daenerys with these Dothrakis wanting to invade, and like sent off an assassin after being convinced by a small council. But once he thought it through, and once Ned screamed at him, he knew that Ned was right. You know, no, Robert was a softie. He wouldn't have killed Cersei's kids. I mean, unless it was in like a real fit of rage, like right at the moment. But once you calmed him down and he thought it through, like no, he wouldn't have done it. That's just not who we find out as like Robert is. Da, 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 da. Bring back the bronies. Yes, I know. Robert only talks to Ned with candor when they're alone. At minimum, is aware of Renly's scheme. Tywin owns the crown's debt, so Robert beggars it. Coincidence. I never really got the idea. Like, I understand like the nominal thing about Robert beggaring the realm because of his tourneys and everything, but the tourneys could never be that expensive in reality. Now granted, like George R. Martin isn't very good at economics and stuff, but there's no way that having a tourney every few months could beggar the realm. It's a ridiculous notion. It's just would never happen. We're talking, a realm filled with millions of people. So I think that, this is why the Littlefinger debt scheme comes in. Like there has to be other things beggaring the realm more than a tourney. I mean, they bring up like the prizes and everything as being like expensive things, and you're like, that's chump change on a national level. It's ridiculous. So I think that like was Robert aware of Renly's scheme? Maybe I don't know, because Renly shows the locket with Marjorie's face to Ned first, and is like, do you think, and like checks with Ned to think if like maybe he'd be into Marjorie. If Robert already knew about the scheme, like Renly would have no reason to go to Ned with the locket. He would have already presented it to him. So I don't know. I don't think that Robert knew about Renly's scheme at the beginning, and I think that the beggaring is more of a Littlefinger death scheme. I don't really think that Robert was beggaring the realm. I just don't think it makes sense. I love the Martells, but do you think they're all going to die on their adventures? Is there some deeper truth to be discovered chasing emo Darkstar? Yes, I believe Darkstar, that path is going to lead us to whatever is happening at Starfall and the Starfall mystery box. I do think that at least Ariane as a character is going to play all the way until the end. She's far too much time has been dedicated to developing her character and introducing her and things like that. But it's but I think they're in. My problem with modern media is that we are seeing less and less traditionally feminine in the last few years. Japanese games are still great though, but I am not anti-woke. The thing is, I don't know what traditionally feminine is. I think that these things are largely illusions. Like what, I don't know like what you'd believe like traditionally feminine is, because like you're putting forward the idea that somehow Japanese games are showing traditional femininity, which is not the case. Like I mean, traditional femininity is women not going to school, doing farm labor, and birthing a lot of kids, right? Like, is that in Japanese
I think
games?
I'm sure it's probably one of them. I think what he means is like he wants the Princess Peach, where she needs to be rescued, and Mario has to save her. He doesn't like characters like Furiosa from Mad Max, who are
Right,
like,
you're talking
yeah,
like girly girl culture,
right. Which and Joel, you
girly girl culture is not traditional. I mean, it's not traditional in any sense. Like,
right, but that's what they mean. Joel, you
right,
have to explain
no,
to me
but I think it's
historically,
important to point this out that like
right?
girly girl culture is a very modern idea, um, that, first of all, like women with huge breasts, like makeup,
Hmm.
like being cutesy, uh, that's all very modern kind of ideas. There's nothing traditional about those things, and I think it's important to focus on this, like what a traditional woman was, you know. Um, let's let you know let's bring up our traditional woman. Like, okay, all right, here we go. Here's our traditional woman. Is this what is this what we're I haven't seen this in a Japanese game. Like, right? Here's our what is it? Like, or are we talking about like um um what's the character from Death Note? What's her name?
Misa
Misa.
Mane.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Let's talk about these two characters, okay? Okay. All right. Cuz modern like, nerd like bro culture will like love this. Like the sexy virgin who's completely like dedicated and like whose life revolves around the protagonist, right? Um and there's nothing, I mean, what era did this girl ever live in? Like, what era did she ever live in? Never. This never existed. And this gets into a larger thing about what like the different like what reactionaryism things is, and we find this in like Afghanistan, like with the burqa, or like the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Like they'll talk about bringing women back or bringing society back to more pure times, but their society had never been that conservative. There was never a point in human history where women were wearing burqas. There were never a point in human history where like women didn't have had so little agency, and that the world was where religion was getting taught at schools like to such a degree. There was never that level of conservatism. So they're talking about going back to something that doesn't exist. And I think with Joel, you're caught up in this too, like this idea that there's some like time in the past where things were more to your liking, and I'm telling you, there wasn't. Like, this is your traditional woman, you know. She wasn't sexy. She wasn't wearing makeup. She was doing chores and rearing children, and that was it. Like, is that what you want? Is that what you'd be happy with? Like, um, because what you want is this cutesy sexy thing, right? This cutesy sexy thing.
What
But this
he
is
and these
completely
grifters want, they would have to go back to the 1920s in black and white films where Charlie Chaplin was rescuing the girl on the train tracks. Because if you think about it, film in
mm,
the last like 50 years have had like these non traditional women. All the popular ones. I hate to
yeah.
mimic. Red Letter Media, but Sarah Connor, Ellen Ripley. They were
Mhm.
not traditional feminine heroes, and they're in some of the most popular films all the time that people love to quote. So, yeah, like, are we really
Mm.
doing this? Come on, Joel, stop, stop. You drank
I
the
mean,
Kool Aid, buddy.
yeah, there's no back then. There's no traditional woman, in that respect. I don't like. You ask yourself like, what do you want? Like on a very basic level, what do you want in a woman? Like, what do you want women to be? Um,
Submissive.
right. Like, is that what you want? Like, is it just submissivity? And like, traditionally, women were submissive, and sexy girl is sexy Japanese girl is submissive as well. Is that it? Because having lived in Japan and having a Japanese girlfriend, let me tell you, not that great. I mean, it's great at first, not that great. um, who are the QAnoners of the A Song of Ice and Fire world? I mean, in story, it would have to be like the R'hllor worshippers, right? Like they believe in this like crazy prophecy that like um that is completely false, like this Misa Misa thing and burning people alive and stuff like that. Um, in the fan community, there's none. There's none in the fan community. Song of Ice and Fire people aren't like in the aren't like QAnon people at all. Um, I'm curious. Have you ever read The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe? It's a pretty famous sci-fi series. I know Martin is a Wolfe fan. Um, I mean, I have not. I'm trying to 4-volume sci-fi novel written um, from 80 to 83. Um, Shadow and the Torture, Severin, Necropolis. I've not read it. I guess this has come up before because like the idea that it takes place essentially in South America and that's the map or whatever is kind of a funny thing. Um, I've really thought about the recently. I've been thinking about since looking into Wheel of Time, um, especially like language wise, what things George started taking from other fantasy writers and how like how the in that sense, like how did the language of fantasy novels come about? Because obviously in the Middle Ages people didn't talk like in a fantasy novel. People aren't like that man is craven. Like that's no, that's not it's not how they spoke. You know, um, thank you, sire. I shall go forth and vanquish the dragon. Like, no, like why would that be the way they talked? Because no, that's not. But somehow that became like the fantasy language, and so and George certainly adopted a lot of that. And I do wonder like what collection of books like created all of that language. And certainly a lot comes from Wheel of Time. But stuff must come from like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So I do wonder if it's just like a linguist should at one point read a PhD dissertation about like the major words and language flow that created this like the modern myth of fantasy speak. Um, uh, 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 um, Traditionally feminine women, yeah, I mean that about the typo. The way they made Velma was more masculine, for example. That's not anti woke, but yeah, I mean, getting back to like these ideas of femininity are modern commercial creations since the advent of makeup, um, fake boobs, girdles, high heels. all sorts of things that were like made to like that. Keep in mind that you are largely a product of like believing things that like of the commercial world. Um, okay, here's a basic thing. Okay, that most men don't think about. Naturally, most women have mustaches. Okay, putting that out there. Most women have mustaches. Okay, all right. We think of mustaches as being very, very masculine, but naturally they grow on women. Okay, women wax them off, they pluck them out, they get naturally women have hairy legs, they have hairy pits, they grow unibrows. You know, that's how they are. And you can look up these histories on like when did waxing start? When did shaving your armpits start? Like when did these things start becoming feminine? And they're all very, very modern. There's a Presidents of the United States of America song called Peaches. And there's this line in it. Peaches come from a man. They were put there by they're peaches. Peaches come from a can. They were put there by a man. All right. It's a very weird thing to think about how these concepts of femininity, many of them, are created by men and marketed to men. And so you're like being turned on, much in the same way as like, whatever, jerking off to manga or even porn itself the director is usually a man. He's put together these actors and he's creating an art. And, all of these things are male created. Like your concept of femininity is a male created illusion that's very recent, and it's not just you. It's not like it's not like I don't like big eyelashes and hourglass figures and makeup and stuff. It's not like I don't fall for it too. Okay, it's not okay, but sit back and recognize that like naturally women have mustaches. Naturally women don't have these like big boobs and aren't going, hey, yeah, like that's not how it is. Like these things are created. And they're created relatively recently. Let me think about, let's see here.
By the way, to interrupt you for a minute, someone asked a
Yeah.
very important question I know you're going to want to answer.
Mm.
They did not super chat it. They go, Preston, how much do I need to donate for you to do a leftover stream / podcast?
I don't know. The that's a toughie. I would have to, because the thing is, I feel like it's been so long. I'd have to go back and like, um, uh, I'd have to go back and rewatch the leftovers and be prepared to talk about it. It's been so long. Like, when did this become? When did Paris Hilton like and all of this like kind of when did that become
Ooh,
femininity?
early to mid 2000. That's femininity. That's cringe. That's cringe as fuck. God damn, that was cringe back then too.
Right,
That's
right.
hot.
Um, but these things, or it's just it's an odd thing because once you break out of these molds and start realizing like, oh shit, like that's not how all women look, or not how all women act. I mean, maybe it's all Marilyn Monroe. Do you think Marilyn Monroe just did it? Like there was just the Marilyn Monroe thing, and everyone's just like trying to recreate that. I don't know. It's it's like making Vel. I mean, that's the thing, is like making Velma masculine. Like, I mean, Velma's a cartoon. Uh, And I get it. Like people are like, oh, why we have to make them frumpy or whatever. People, there's big complaints about making the M&Ms like less frumpy and stuff, and like making the M&Ms less sexy. Didn't Tucker Carlson go on that long thing?
I forgot that was a whole thing. God, he's such a loser. Did you see what he did with Obama's gay lover? How he made that like a whole thing?
Oh my god, he's off the rails, dude. Just pull in any random dude off the street who's like, I had sex with Obama. Really, really. Um, but yeah. I mean, so this is the original Velma, you know. And then what we were going to talk about, like the Velma show. Let's see here, and what she looks like.
I'll agree with this point that grifters have made, only because it's a fair point. The Velma show on HBO, I've seen it. I've seen a couple episodes. It was not funny. It was so
Right. I
bad,
mean,
and
everybody
it it,
agrees that
it,
the Velma show is bad, right?
it was bad. It's because Mindy Kaling has never gotten over her lusting over white men who never give her attention, and she's also not even a funny comedian. I feel like she's more like the token Indian woman than anything. When there's plenty of other Indian actors and actresses and comedians who are way funnier than her, for
Mm,
some reason Hollywood just gives her so much attention when there's just so many other people they could be giving attention to.
yeah. Well, I mean, she keep in mind that she was like a writer and was connected and stuff like that. So it's not entirely um the um it's not entirely like that there's this like board this conspiracy in Hollywood of like who are we going to give attention to. I mean, there's a little bits of that, like, people are trying to, are going to say, I guess, is this like, here's a frumpy Velma. I think they're complaining about like something like this, like that this is Velma. And before, I mean, the changes are pretty minor, but whatever, fine. She's a little frumpier. I don't know if she's necessarily more masculine, but um, you know, what is masculinity and femininity? These questions, right? Like, you know,
Well, it also comes down to the whole thing that, as gross as and awkward as this sounds, Velma in the early Scooby Doo movies and shows was kind of a sexual awakening for a lot of people, and nobody likes change.
I'm
You're
trying to get rid of my Velma here, and I can't because of the fine. Velma will just be freaking with us. Oh, finally, there we go. But the thing is, these like things of like what is masculine and what is feminine. Like once you start like stepping back and asking these very basic questions, like things really change. Like what is masculine? Like, do we have to accept that Joe Rogan is like the basis of masculinity? Like, do we all have to bench press and brag about our drug use and worry about banging bitches and stuff, like and like um it's it's weird, and be super into MMA. Like, is that masculinity? Because I feel uncomfortable reducing masculinity to something so pathetic, like that you're only manly if you're into like MMA and like bench pressing and stuff like that. So like I wouldn't want to be reduced to that. I don't know if women would want to be reduced to girly girl submissive boobs and short skirts and whatever
the
either.
this guy here, Marcus, makes a very good point, and he's right. Has anyone ever considered the option that the reason they don't like the new children's movies and shows anymore is that they themselves are no longer children? Yeah, that's basically it as well. Yeah,
That's
pretty
true.
much.
That's true.
Preston already
Uh,
said that earlier. Like it's
yeah.
not made for you.
Um, in Australia, we have capital L liberalism and normal liberalism, which are antithetical to each other, which is annoying as smeg. Yeah, no, I've heard that like some of the most right wing politicians in Australia are like in like the Liberal Party, and you're like it means the exact opposite in America. Yeah. Spank me, Carmine. Woohoo! Nice. Okay. Um, The suck it up and walk it off attitude led me to a crippling addiction to opiates to cope. I'm 2 years sober as of last Friday. Hey, well, thank you. I see you, Phil. That's it's good to hear. Well, thank you for the courage to talk about your story, because I know these things can be very very embarrassing. But
Congratulations, Phil.
congratulations
Congratulations.
on your soberness, and hopefully like your story will kind of help other people too.
Also, if you ever feel like getting back like into the whole thick of it, don't. And instead use that money you would have used on drugs to support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/Preston Jacobs
Carmine
and
is
myself.
ridiculous. Off. Um, Favorite A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones fanfics. Thoughts on the fanfics based on the franchise? Have you written any fanfics yourself? Doesn't have to be A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. What? Have you not heard of our A Song of Ice and Fire fanfic? Our fanfic is our favorite. But check it out on my channel. You can if you go to the folder, The Winds of Winter, sort of, you will see the chapters. But fanfics, I have read a few other fanfics out there that existed on A Song of Ice and Fire. I did.
You
They
did.
they were fine, but again, they weren't in the George R. R. Martin style. And so immediately I didn't feel like I was in that world. Um, I'm actually thinking I started a script on George R. R. Martin's writing style. I don't know if I'm going to continue it because but it but I've been thinking a lot about it recently, about like what George R. R. Martin does and how he does things differently. Like I wrote something recently on like George R. R. Martin starts not just like, how you hear the story that like every book has to have a hook, like, so the first line is usually really good, and most books work that way. However, most chapters don't work that way. Once you kind of get into the book, writers just relax and start writing. George R. R. Martin never relaxes, and it's like every chapter is like gonna hook you again, and the last sentence gonna hook you again, and things like this, and stuff like that. So it's so, but I don't know if there's other fanfics that I really like. I've heard about. I haven't read it myself, but I heard that Star Trek has this fanfic called the um it's something Tales of Wolf 359, the oral history of Wolf 359. And apparently like they came together and like built and made this book, and then they given a cease and desist to stop. But apparently there's some neat fanfics out there. A lot. I mean, I think Star Trek is kind of the king of fanfics. Um, but I guess the most successful one is uh, um, the 50 Shades of Grey. Raising taxes in medieval times was a dangerous thing. Oh, that's true. Raising taxes, but they I think they, I guess people tried to get them from on a local level, but they tried to get them from like a lot of port duties and things like that. They try to pull in taxes into different ways. um, hmm. I think Girly Girl is a continuation of traditional femininity. It's a switch from objectification by concealment to objectification by exhibitionism. Huh. Yeah, probably. Probably both relying on male voyeurism. Yeah, they would it's funny. So when I was in Afghanistan, one of the things that the women in burqas do is they try to wear really sparkly like shoes underneath their burqas, because it's the only thing that people can actually see, and so they'll see some like sparkly shoes. There can definitely be like um there's definitely like attempts at things that are alluring with concealment or subtlety and stuff like that. But I do think that like a lot of it is driven by marketing shit to people. Um, and so like trying to sell people makeup and stuff like that, try to make money. What's going on, Preston? Talking about traditional women in anime girl picture. Well, that's what I'm talking about, man. There is no traditional woman. It's just Preston smash or pass Misa from Death Note. I think of course that's a smash. Of course, I'm only human. I'm only human.
That's not just a smash. That's a Hulk smash. Please, are you kidding me? God,
Yeah,
Jesus.
I know. Um, to be, I love Carmi. I've loved Cammy and Chun Li from Street Fighter. Yennefer from Witcher. Traditional femininity is not the right word. Glamour, badass is Charlie's Angel type of getting less in the West. Yeah, I mean, if you're into girly girl stuff, it's fine. Um, there's plenty of like women out there that look like that. But recognize that not every woman is gonna wanna look like that, and that not every person needs to look like that. So as time goes on, I see more and more just diversity of things that are in society. You see more naked women on screen, and you see more covered up women on screen, and anything, it's everything. Um, um, some people are like, where I'm back. I like the funny thing is that it's back in the old discussions of stuff, but there's obviously something to like cutesy culture that gets a rise out of people, but it's a lot of these little things. I think a lot of it has to do with like in general youth signals. There's this theory about why gentlemen prefer blondes, and the theory goes that at least Western children, when they're young, tend to be blonde. And as you get older, your hair darkens up. And therefore, blonde hair is a youth signal. And most youth signals are attractive, standing upright versus crouching over in a hunching position. One is an old man and one's a healthy young person. Having a full head of hair versus being bald. Having no wrinkles versus wrinkles. Having old people tend not to have that many muscles, so having muscles on a body. And so being skinny versus being fat, like all of them are youth markers. And so the idea is that like cutesiness is like that blondness. Like kids are cute, people that are younger are cute, and therefore that youth marker is going to like attract people. You don't tend to come across too many like cutesy 60-year-old women, so that kind of stuff. So porn is art. Everything is art. Everything is art.
Speaking of porn, I mean, this isn't porn, but did you see Trey's newest uh, Twitter post? Did you see this?
um
Can I send it to you?
I saw the one in him in underwear.
Here. Look at this. I'll send it to. Yeah, that's the one. I was about to
That's
send
the
it to you on
one. Okay,
Facebook.
okay.
Yeah, that's
The,
the
the
one.
funny
It's
thing
just
about that one is that his arm is like this, so he can like hold the camera, and it looks like he's an amputee. He looks like he only has. You know what I'm talking about? Looking at the picture, right?
yeah.
He looks like he
I
has one arm.
I asked him if he was down to come on tonight, and at first he was like, "Yeah, if I'm not too tired." And then he had to back out. So
Yeah,
he's back
fuck it.
from vacation. So hopefully we can get him on to like cover Ahsoka or something else with us if you're down.
Yeah.
He still wants to do the Mirror Shield debate. Don't forget about that.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, can you explain the mirror shield debate would be a really fun one.
Hmm.
Um, the can you explain the Alardim thing? I keep forgetting to ask about it. I hear it mentioned from time to time, and I've never found where it began. The Alardim thing is essentially Alardim has such a weird name, and Alardim, when you hear his name in a Clash of Kings mentioned, and it's mentioned, it might only be like 3 times. But hold on a second. Let me get it. Actually, it's mentioned 8 times. His name, Alardim, is mentioned 8 times. Um, by Tyrion in A Clash of Kings. So it's like it's this unusual amount of time. Like so, L.R. Deem is essentially just the when the that baby was killed at the brothel. L.R. Deem happens to be the guard that was sent in to stab the thing under Janis Slint's like order. And it didn't need to be like anything. Like you could have just like had the guy be nameless. It didn't matter. And for some reason, Tyrion mentions his name, his really weird name, 8 times in A Clash of Kings, to the point where you're just like, L.R. Deem, L.R. Deem, L.R. Deem. It just like sticks with you, right? And so L.R. Deem orders, like he orders the ship guy, hey, you know, if you happen to want to throw this guy overboard to die, like, make it happen. And so we never hear about L.R. Deem again. So I think most fans assume that L.R. Deem was thrown overboard and drowned. But looking at it another way, like why, well, as he was sent to the wall, why would that captain bother doing that? Why would they murder somebody when they were just going to send him to the wall? Like there's no incentive for anybody to actually murder the guy. So why not just let him arrive at the wall? So I joke that L.R. Deem, you know, he's mentioned so much because he's a character that's going to come back, and that he's just sitting at Eastwatch, like among the people there, because there's plenty of people at Eastwatch, you know. But we don't see L.R. Deem when Janis Slint arrives. So that's the whole thing with L.R. Deem. It's just like specifically Tyrion 2, but he gets mentioned more after that. But like, listen to Tyrion 2, A Clash of Kings again, and it's just like, oh my god, how many times can you bring up fucking L.R. Deem? And so that's the joke about it. Like, once you listen to Tyrion 2, you will laugh and you will be now in on the joke of like of L.R. Deem and the incredibleness of L.R. Deem. Preston show though, have you seen Velma? Viciously anti-male. Yeah, sure. I mean, I haven't seen it. I heard it was bad, but and obvious. But whether it is or not is kind of dumb. Like, is kind of irrelevant. I think that what people like to do, it's the case of taking anecdote and projecting trend, right? That like you make a really bad show, and then you want to say that like everything is doing this, and it's just like, no, it was just from what I hear, because I haven't seen it, it was a lazy show. I think the fundamental premise is wrong too, because it's like holding up Scooby-Doo as like an example of traditional values when Scooby-Doo was like taking the shit out of everybody. Like it was the mocking of everything. So, I mean, it'd be like taking Scary Movie and being like, this isn't your grandpa's Scary Movie. Like, well, Scary Movie was already making fun of everything. Like, come on. Like, it's ridiculous to hold up Scary Movie as like, so I think the premise is really bad, but I think in general, I think it's you know, you can't just take Velma as this example and like project it to everything, which is I think the problem. Or I joke, I talk about this with Carmine all the time, like because a lot of people get confused when like say a really bad movie comes out that and somebody does some like anti-woke thing about how bad this movie is, and we kind of go, oh, these grifters complaining about anti-woke, and then like some people's response will be like, what, you think that's a good movie? And you're like, no, it being a good movie is completely irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. You know, it's like me complaining that Bill Cosby is a horrible human being because he's black. Like, that's the wrong reason to criticize Bill Cosby. Like, Bill Cosby is a bad guy because he's a rapist. Like, it has nothing to do with the fact that he's a black guy. You know, like it's just that he's a rapist, right? So, but if I only did stories about black people who did bad things, like you're creating this narrative that isn't there. So they'll talk about bad movie that happens to be woke, another bad movie that happens to be woke, and then they try to create this like false association that woke equals bad, which doesn't, you know, which isn't there. It's like if I did a video on Bill Cosby and then I did a video on R. Kelly, you know, and I just like did that all day long. Like, okay, What am I
The
trying to
sad part
say?
about the Velma is that I have been waiting for an adult like Scooby Doo show for so long, and they just dropped the ball. You're right; it was just lazy, lame,
Yeah.
not funny.
Joel says, if I offended, I'm sorry. I agree on feminism too. No, I'm very difficult to offend. So and you didn't say anything offensive, but I think you brought up some very interesting things that get into these discussions. I think the discussion of what masculinity and what femininity is very interesting conversation. And so what you brought in was very interesting stuff that we talked about. Because it's fascinating stuff once you kind of step back and go, well, like, what is feminine, and why does that, like, why does that turn me on, right? There's these weird like concepts. um the I want to bring up something that actually appeared, here. This is something I want to show. Here we go. This is this statue. Here we go. This is an old Indian statue, right? Now, when Westerners, we kind of see what's going on here today, right? She has comically large, exaggerated hips, comically large breasts, getting into that hyper femininity thing, right? You know, creation. This is all fantasy, right? People don't look like this in real life. Um, but clearly, like, hundreds, thousands of years in India, they were talking about this is Shiva, like, or no, I'm sorry, brass statue, daughter of the mountain, Parvati. Um, the but the point is like, clearly, like, big breasts, like, that's child rearing, femininity, big hips, that kind of stuff. They're creating this. This is an ancient equivalent of anime. But when Westerners came to India, um, they actually saw Indian art as less than Western art, because they were like, oh, you guys don't know proportions. Like, you don't know what you're freaking doing. Um, and they kind of downplayed it as like the outsider, like, these people don't know how to do art, which I think is hilarious, because you also have like, um, which you have the because it's not that like the Westerners weren't doing the same thing, right? So, like, you know, here's Michelangelo's David, right? This like six pack abs, like, muscular dude, like, his proportions are actually all off. Like, look how huge Michelangelo David's hands are and how large his upper body is compared to like his legs. Like, and this is all intentional. One way in like how it's perceived from down below, but also like Michelangelo is creating a caricature. Men don't look like this. Men don't look like this. Like, naturally, men have pot bellies. Okay, and most men, yeah, they got man tits. Like, this is the thing. Like, what a real man looks like. Um, what a real man looks like. Let's see. Let me find. Let's see here. This is the best example. Let's find some like people that have not been affected by like commercial society, right? So this is like what real men look like. These are real, regular men. You know, they got some flab. These are like healthy, skinny men. But this is how men look naturally. This is natural men. You got a layer of fat, some flab, some pot bellies. Like these are like healthy, regular men, how we looked naturally, and yet somehow we get these ideas of like, you know, muscle bound, upper body strength dudes. But this is it. This is how dudes look. You know. But then we get these things like Michelangelo's David or you know these things. So being this off, we start worshiping. You know, we all want to be like the exaggerations. Um, Let's see here. Almost to the end. Diana Rigg is the go-to in this community, not Charlie's Angels. I mean, Diana Rigg from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. You know, does good storytelling transcend cultures? Should we look at other cultures' stories for lessons? Should we analyze foreign stories differently? The I don't know. I think like as Westerners, um we are very particular to Western storytelling structure. And that when we run into other stories from other cultures, they strike us weird because we're like, that's a bad story. Um it's like um I've been told like the I remember when I first arrived to teach in China, I arrived near the Mooncake Festival, and so I was told like the story of the Mooncake Festival, which is for the most part it's about this like goddess who gets she gets kidnapped on Earth, and then she has a child with a bunch of with a human, and then she finally goes back to heaven and leaves because she's grown to love her husband, and it's just like, and she can't see her. The father gets take his kids get taken away from him, and the only time he gets to see them is at the Mooncake Festivals when the wife and the son get to come together, and things like this, and like the story like just doesn't sit right with a Westerner. It doesn't have the same like story beats, you know. We require like ironic endings and things like that. Like sometimes you watch like a Chinese movie and it's just this trudge towards negativity, and you're just like, what's the point? Like, where is it going? It's going nowhere. It's going nowhere. Like, you know, Japanese stories are are very circle and cyclical, and you know, it's I think we're very biased from what we come where we come from. So I mean, I think like looking at other stories is interesting, but I don't know as a Westerner, I think you're ruined. I think because I've read lots of stories from around the world, and I always think they suck. Like I never think that I only think Western stories are good, and it's completely because it's a bias of me being a Westerner, and like it's just what I've learned to be a good story, you know. So, uh Trey the Explainer is a very good YouTuber. Well, he's more than that. He's more than that. He's a very good man. Right, Carmine?
Yee.
No, no, no. You're saying he sucks. You hate him. You hate him.
I feel so bad. I don't know if I should feel bad for Glidus. That I don't know if he's annoyed that this meme has become so big as it is because everyone keeps pushing it, and
Oh, the
I feel
horse?
like
I'm
yeah,
sure he's
like
annoyed. I'm sure he's very annoyed. Though he hasn't. Has he removed it from his Twitter yet? I don't
I
know.
have no idea.
Yeah, I'm sure he's annoyed. I mean, you know.
By the way, real quick, recently I actually spoke to another Ice and Fire YouTuber, someone who's been in the community for quite some time, which is going to be very awkward once I tell you who it is.
Oh yeah.
It's I spoke privately in a private call with Indeed Geek, and
Okay.
yeah, and very nice guy, very nice guy. He did something with his channel recently that I wanted to ask him a question on, and yeah, no, he sends his regards. Very nice guy. We spoke briefly. It was like I think
Hold on. Hold on.
4
Hold
a.m.
on.
his time.
Hold on. Hold on. Just a second.
Hmm.
Hey there. Hey there. Not yet. Not yet. I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna wrap it up in a second. Okay. Uh, yeah. Okay. I will. Okay. All right. All right. Bye. Sorry. Real life. real life for a second. The wifey.
No worries, no worries. But yeah, no, very cool guy. Kind of reminds me of you because I asked him about. I won't go into to detail, but I asked him about some the certain situation, and he had a very diplomatic answer to it. I was like, oh, guy's a gentleman. Guy's a very cool gentleman. So he does disagree with some of your theories, and I'm like, wow, you should come on the podcast sometime if you're free and discuss it with Preston. And he's like, yeah, I'd be down, blah 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 blah. So
Sounds good. Sounds good.
potential collab in the future.
All right. All right. This is the Carmine. He like reaches out to people, and all of a sudden there's a collab. I mean, obviously, like nobody believes in all of Preston's theories, but you know, it's hard. It's hard to get people on the Quentin train, man. It's hard to get people on the Lemon Gate, but but you know, Al-Ardim coming back. Al-Ardim coming back. Um, the best art glamorizes reality. Yeah, I mean, it's the I think they're it's trying to take something of like reality and showing to something extreme, because obviously like um uh entertainment has to draw the eye and real life is boring, so there has to be something like a little more extreme to it. This is why like in your pornography it's a gangbang. It's got to be more extreme than reality, um and stuff like that. But this is why like there's 45 gallons of blood in a Quentin Tarantino movie when someone gets shot, and things like this. um so but they're definitely like getting into this, like how to stimulate, how to like get people's attention, um which is why why people do what they're doing with, I mean, in life in general. you know um all right, let's get to the end here because I do have to get going. What time zone is in Deep Geek in? He's British, right?
Yes, sir. He's in the UK, so I had to talk to him at like 4 a.m. my time.
Wow, that's like prime time for you, man.
No, it's this guy, this fucking guy.
Joel apologizes to you, Carmine. He didn't meet a fence. I
Fuck
don't know if
you,
it.
you fuck! How dare you, you motherfucker! You fuck! I don't care.
Jeez, Carmine's the worst. Carmine's the worst. He's like insulted like every single person in my chat at some point.
In my defense, they were dumb. In my defense.
Every single person in this chat has been has been insulted by you. They're all dumb, you're saying. But yes, um dude, whatever happened to Game of Thrones Academy, funniest Song of Ice and YouTubers? They were the two guys in there's those two guys in Israel.
Yes, I happen to know a bit about this. So I believe it was Gil and Itamar.
Hmm.
Gil, I think, met someone and decided to move to the U.S. with them. I think that's what happened.
Oh, okay.
And or no, wait, not Gil. I'm sorry, not Gil. It was Itamar who did. Gil eventually ran the channel by himself, and I think it just he went on to do other things. So
Yeah. Um, I think yeah, it's yeah, he seems to be doing, yeah, like non Ice and Fire related stuff um on physics. It's interesting. Okay. Well, people move on. People move on. Um all right, last one and then I got to go. I got to go cuz my the wifey is calling. Um Hope your real life is better than mine. Keep up the fanfic, please. Love you and Carmine. Have a great day. Oh, Kyle, I'm sure things will get better. Here's the thing about life is at least for me, um, every year of my life has been an improvement on the previous year. Like I'm happier, and I don't necessarily mean happy in the sense of like playing with a puppy, kind of like happy, or like commercial sense of gratification of getting stuff, but like in a sense that like I feel more satisfied with like the world and like who I've become and what I'm striving towards. And so it's I think like, you know, if you just focus on that, like uh you know, like I say, if you get out and about and, you know, improve yourself and focus on yourself and um doing the things that you think are important, figuring out what you think is important and working towards those things, you know, then I think it's, you know, life gets pretty good. It's when you're young and you don't have any power, like when you're 13 years old, that life sucks, you know. And then life kind of sucks when you're not doing what you really want to be doing and not what you've kind of believe in what you believe in, you know, stuff like that. But as you get older, you tend to get more money and more power and more freedom to do what you want. And so in general, it's all right. You know, I understand that like people can be down when things, not everything goes their way. Like they're not getting that promotion at work, or they're in a dead end job, or they're not meeting somebody. But you know, these sorts of things take time, and there'll be downsides and upsides and times. But overall, in general, as many you know, as many disappointments as life has dealt me, and life has dealt me a lot of disappointments. Like, I don't know. I do feel that like that I'm happier where like of who I'm happy. I'm happier of who I'm becoming, and that makes me in general happier in my life. You know. Okay, one last on the lemon tree, and I gotta go. Preston, in regards to the lemon tree, have you thought that lemons is referring to the color, not the tree, not the lemon? I'm sorry, lemon is referring to the color, not the lemons. Gold tree, golden blood family tree. I don't know. I mean, like, so recently I have been looking at like how George does art, and like it's kind of a rarity that George does stuff so like blanket metaphorical. And I talk about like metaphor versus simile. Like when you say like simile, you say blue, the sky is blue as a sapphire. You know, the he struck the man like a giant strikes a cantaloupe. You know, like that's a simile. Well, metaphor is when you don't use the as or the like, and you say the sky was a sapphire. You know, and so George R. R. Martin uses similes, but unless it's spoken, it's very rare that he actually uses metaphor. Like it's very rare that he'll say like, you know, this he won't say the moon was a knife. He'll say it was like a knife. You know, I'm not saying that like metaphor isn't there every once in a while, but it's I've been really focusing on this particular thing, like how often he similes and how often he metaphors. And he does a lot of like likes and ases versus like is, you know. Though this is funny. The Sphinx is the riddle. They're both yellow, close enough. But I understand. It's an interesting idea, but in the sense that she thinks it's a lemon tree, you know, not like its yellow. Its color was like a lemon, or its color was as a lemon. You know, that kind of thing. Anyway, but that's all. But thank you everyone for staying with me for this long. I will talk to you guys soon. All right, bye.